Chapter 188. After a round of inspection, they didn't find anything wrong. Only then did the army start to cook. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ling Song, who had arranged enough guard work, called the 2 battalion commanders who were acting company commanders to his temporary room. The 3 of them met, and Ling Song had no intention of being polite. He bluntly said, "Gentlemen, the 6th young master has been setting up a trap in the capital, and it has been going very smoothly. This time, we were able to come here and show off our skills is also part of the plan. Now that we have smoothly arrived in the capital, it is equivalent to taking the first step. However, the situation will only become more severe. Even before we fight with the Walla army, I'm afraid that the Great Ming Empire's capital army will be probing us first." Teng Shan and Wuxia both nodded in agreement after hearing Ling Song's words. It was clear that they had the same understanding. "Very good, I believe that you can also guess something." "That's right, someone is looking down on us, and I'm afraid that there will be a lot of probing. The 6th young master has already laid the groundwork for this matter. He has already made it clear to the outside world that as mercenaries, we don't have good tempers. In order to confirm this matter, the 6th young master didn't even come here to see us today." Ling Song continued, "The 6th young master has already used his actions to tell us everything. The next test will be at any time, and how we perform is very important. Whether we can satisfy or disappoint the 6th young master, it is very likely that everything will happen tonight. Do you understand?" "Regiment Commander, we all understand." "How about this, please hand over the night duty to us, 3rd Company. I guarantee that we'll complete the mission. No matter who comes, we'll leave no one behind. If we can't complete the mission, I am willing to be punished according to military law." Teng Shan suddenly stood up, and then a resolute expression appeared on his face. "Regiment Commander, please give the night duty to our 4th Company. If we can't eliminate all the enemies, I am willing to offer my head." 4th Company Commander Wuxia was even more resolute, directly putting his life on the line. "Battalion Commander Wu, don't fight with me. In terms of qualifications, you are inferior to me." Teng Shan looked at Wuxia with a face full of anger. He was extremely dissatisfied that this person wanted to fight with him for the mission. "Battalion Commander Teng, seniority is not enough to feed you. Everything depends on your methods. Our 4th Company is confident that we can complete this mission well." Wuxia's eyes were filled with sparks. He looked as if he would start a fight if he didn't agree with Teng Shan. The 2 battalion commanders showed that they wanted to fight for the mission, and this made Ling Song nodded with satisfaction. This was the military's morale. If everyone retreated in the face of trouble, then there would be no way to continue fighting this war. It was just that sometimes having confidence was a good thing, but in the end, strength was what determined the outcome of the matter. For example, Ling Song's strength was much stronger than the 2 of them. Whether it was his ability to lead troops, the quality of his soldiers, or the level of his official position, he was better than the 2 of them. That was why he snatched the mission the moment he opened his mouth. "Alright, there's no need for you guys to fight over it. You're all tired from the day's journey. Let me take over tonight's duty." "How can we do that?" They objected almost at the same time. Just a moment ago, they were still arguing in full swing, and even seemed like they were going to fight if they didn't agree. Now, they stood on the same line and objected to Ling Song. "Why not? My position is the highest here." Ling Song said with an attitude of, "I am the regiment commander, you have to listen to me." "No." Teng Shan shook his head, showing an attitude of, "Even if you are the highest official, you can't have the final say." When it was Wuxia's turn, he said bluntly, "If you want to talk about tiredness, everyone has been walking for the whole day. We are all tired. Why should we rest while your 2nd Company is responsible for the night duty? This is unfair to the brothers of the 2nd Company. I will not agree to this. If Regiment Commander insists on doing this, then tomorrow when I see the 6th young master, I will definitely complain." This is abusing power for personal gain, using force to oppress others. When Wuxia said this, Ling Song's eyes widened, but he didn't have the strength to do so. If it was in Crimson City, Ling Song would have done this, and Wuxia could only obey as a subordinate. But now, the sixth young master was right in front of them, and they would see him tomorrow. It was no wonder that he dared to say this. This would indeed put a lot of pressure on Ling Song, and he didn't want someone to complain about him the moment he saw the sixth young master. That's right. If you don't give us a chance, I will also complain when I see the sixth young master tomorrow. Teng Shan saw that this seemed to be effective, and immediately followed suit. The two battalion commanders had the same attitude, and Ling Song knew that it was impossible to use his position to oppress others for the mission. He could only sigh and say, "Then let's draw lots." Tonight, the three of us will take turns to be on duty. As for whether or not there will be any accidents, and who will encounter them, it will all depend on everyone's luck. That's good. Hearing that it was a draw, Teng Shan and Wuxia immediately felt that it was fair. Immediately, a smile appeared on their faces, completely different from their previous flushed faces. And if this scene was seen by Han Ji, he would definitely regret coming to test them. Who would have thought that in the face of danger, there would still be people fighting to go forward? With such morale, what kind of enemy couldn't be defeated and dealt with? After drawing lots, Ling Song's luck was very bad for the first half of the night. Teng Shan's luck wasn't very good either, drawing a lot near dawn. Only Wuxia, when he saw that the lot he drew was between the third and fourth day, he was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. Alright, some people don't need to be so happy. We just arrived today, maybe they will want to take a look before they try to test us. Teng Shan looked at Wuxia with some jealousy. On the other hand, Ling Song, as expected of a regiment commander, was very open-minded. Seeing that the results were out, he said with a serious face, "No matter what happens, everyone must be careful when you are on duty. One of the sentries must be in the light while the other two are in the dark, forming a triangle to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Alright, you guys can go and prepare." While Ling Song let the two battalion commanders prepare, he also transferred 2 platoon leaders and 10 elite brothers from the second company. Although he said that the lot was drawn early and that the enemy would rarely appear between the first and second day of the night, Ling Song still made preparations to meet the enemy during the operation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have directly transferred 2 platoon leaders to be in charge of the sentries. But no matter how thorough the preparations were, seeing that the second day of the night had passed and the third day of the night had arrived, there was no abnormality in the outside world. Ling Song sighed, somewhat disappointed, and wanted to arrange for someone to inform Wuxia. No need to trouble the regiment commander, I'm already here." Unknowingly, Wuxia brought people and appeared behind Ling Song. Looking at the other party's camp, it was actually also led by 2 platoon leaders, and there were also quite a few squad leaders and vice-squad leaders. Looking at this camp, Ling Song knew that there was no need to remind the other party to be careful. When he left, he only patted the other party's shoulder, but at this moment, silence really spoke louder than words. Wuxia took over the defense, and quickly started to set up according to the plan. Around the small courtyard, the 12 people he brought along split into 3 groups, with 2 in the dark and 1 in the light. He himself found a safe corner and stayed in the middle, constantly looking around with the night vision device in his hand. In his heart, he was still praying that if there were any enemies, they must appear when he was on duty. This was a good opportunity to show his face in front of the 6th young master. Perhaps their prayers had worked. Just a quarter of an hour after Wuxia and the others had hidden themselves, there was finally some movement on the wall of the courtyard. Although it was very slight, it was still discovered by the brothers who were in charge of guarding the courtyard. Speaking of which, this was all due to the camouflage training of the cold front line. Camouflage was created by Yang Chendong, and was improved based on his training when he was a soldier. The requirement was that any qualified cold frontline must be able to stay in the same place for 24 hours without eating or drinking. This was the ability. To be able to stay in the same place for 24 hours was only a pass, 2 days was considered good, and 3 days was considered excellent. At first, many people did not understand this training, thinking that it did not require much skill, and the training was not meaningful. However, after a real test, after staying in the same place for 24 hours without moving, everyone realized how important this training was to train their mentality. It was precisely because of this training that the Cold Front members' violent tempers were much more restrained. This kind of training also allowed many of them to learn how to calm their hearts. This was to ensure that they would be able to face everything calmly under any kind of dangerous situation. The camouflage training also allowed every Cold Frontline to have the potential to become an excellent sentry. It meant that at any time, anyone would be able to complete the task of being on guard. It was because of the inhuman training that the Imperial bodyguards did not discover the 8 hidden sentry. They only saw the 4 open sentry. It was the existence of the sentries that caused the 8 embroidered uniform guards to let down their guard. They carefully observed their surroundings, and after finding that there was nothing out of the ordinary, they began to slowly move towards the 4 sentries. The open sentry was located in the center of the courtyard, far beyond the distance of 70 steps. The Imperial bodyguards' bows could not reach the sentry, so if they wanted to get anything, they had to keep moving closer. However, they did not know that this method of approaching the sentry was bringing them closer to the Grim Reaper. The 8 Imperial bodyguards did have some skills. If it was not for the hidden sentry, it would not have been easy to discover them. However, even though they were discovered, Wu Sheng, who was hiding in the corner and watching everything with his night vision, did not immediately give the order to close the net. It was because he was not sure if the enemy had any reinforcements. This time, he wanted to catch all of them in one fell swoop. If even one of them escaped, it would be considered a failure. Chapter 189. He carefully observed his surroundings, waiting to see if the other party still had any tricks up his sleeve. The 8 embroidered uniform guards had climbed over the high wall and were approaching the 4 sentries. Some of them had even taken out the strong bows on their backs, but Wu Sheng still did not see any backup. It should be these people. Even if they have backup plans, they won't be able to enter the courtyard. Wu Sheng quickly made a decision based on the situation. He then slowly stood up and moved his right hand to his mouth. Hand signals in the day and whistles at night. That was how the cold vanguards communicated with each other. Wu Sheng placed his right hand to his mouth and concentrated his qi into his dantian. He exhaled fiercely, and a sharp whistle was emitted from his mouth. It was especially bright and clear in the silent night. As soon as the whistle was emitted, 6 of the 8 sentries who had been waiting impatiently appeared in the darkness. The 95 style that they had been holding tightly in their hands spat out bright flames in the darkness. They fired directly at the embroidered uniform guards who had their backs facing them. Bang! 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 6 of the 8 embroidered uniform guards were knocked down by the first wave of attacks. The other 2 were also shocked by the sound. One of them stood there in a daze and was hit by the second wave of gunfire. The other reacted quickly and rolled on the ground, trying to find a safe place to hide. However, he was killed by a single shot just as he stood up. This shot was fired by Wu Sheng. Under the night vision goggles, any dodging was meaningless. Bang! 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 Footsteps were heard in the courtyard. One of the cold vanguards who was in charge of guarding the courtyard had rushed over to provide backup. Nothing was absolute. They would always have a backup plan. That was how the cold vanguards operated. As for the other cold vanguards, they were still sleeping in their rooms. Gunshots in the middle of the night had happened before. As long as the gunshots were not too intense, they had the right to not get out of bed. Search. See if there are any more enemies outside. Check if the enemies are completely dead. After Wu Sheng killed an embroidered uniform guard with a single shot, he walked out of the darkness and commanded everyone with a smile on his face. Although this was nothing compared to Ling Feng's previous battles, it was equivalent to showing his face in front of the sixth young master. No matter how he looked at it, it was a joyous occasion. Some people were examining the body, while others had already jumped onto the wall to look outside. However, from the beginning to the end, there were still 2 hidden sentries who did not move at all. This was a precautionary measure. It had to be said that under Yang Chendong's training, the cold vanguard guards had already become elites. If the great Ming dynasty's imperial guards wanted to use strong bows to deal with them, not to mention 8 people, even if 80 or even 800 people came, they still wouldn't be able to gain the slightest advantage. Outside the courtyard, the sudden sound of gunfire startled Han Ji and the other 2. Their instinctive reaction was that something must have happened to the people they sent out. They must have been discovered. As for whether they succeeded or not, and whether they killed or injured their mercenary brothers, they would only know when they saw their brothers who escaped. Han Ji did not move. He was still waiting. Bai Zhuo moved. The gunshot was the signal, and it was time for him to wrap things up. The whistle that signaled the attack was somewhat abrupt in the silent night. This also attracted the attention of Han Ji, who was hiding in a corner and waiting for news. "What's that sound?" He looked around vigilantly and asked his 2 subordinates who were hiding in the corner. "It sounds like a whistle, but it's already the curfew. Who would blow such a thing on the streets in the middle of the night?" One of the subordinates touched his head with a puzzled expression. HM? This is not good. Let's go." On the other hand, Han Ji was worthy of being the commander of the embroidered uniform guards. His reaction was not slow. Although he could not figure out what was wrong, his instincts told him that the situation was not right. The safest thing to do now was to retreat. As he spoke, he rushed out of the corner in a flash. The moment he rushed out, a fiery light flashed in the darkness, staring at the place he had just been hiding. It had been less than half a breath's worth of time, and it would have taken his life. Perhaps it was due to good luck or some other reason, but this shot did not take Han Ji's life. However, his 2 subordinates did not have such good luck. While they were still in a daze, their bodies fell to the ground. Their bodies violently rose and fell several times, and then there was no more movement. When he turned his head to look, he saw the scene of his 2 subordinates dying on the spot. Cold sweat poured down his forehead. At this moment, Han Ji was certain that he had been targeted, and if he was not mistaken, it was the work of mercenaries. After all, in the capital, there were very few people who dared to attack an embroidered uniform guard, and an official of the embroidered uniform guard, on the streets. "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I'm only passing by. I have no intention of making things difficult for you." Knowing the power of the new firearms, Han Ji did not dare to take any chances. He was afraid that in the next moment, he would die on the spot like his subordinates, so he simply stopped hiding. He stood up and stood in the middle of the street, and then loudly shouted. This shout was not only to express his submission, but also to attract the attention of the night watchman in the capital. Although it was a curfew, the people of the 5 cities' warden's office still had the right to walk on the streets, patrol, and protect the law and order. Bah! A crisp sound rang out as soon as Han Ji stood up, and then a piercing pain came from his leg. The strong pain made him half kneel on the ground with a plop, and the cold sweat on his face dripped like rain. The half-kneeling Han Ji did not understand. He had already surrendered, so why did these people still have no intention of letting him go? Did they really want to kill him? "I am the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, a 4th-rank official of the court. You can't kill me, or else it will be very troublesome." Seeing that begging for mercy was not going to work, Han Ji used intimidation. But no matter how he shouted, in the eyes of the ghost snipers, he was already a dead man. Daring to find trouble with the 6th young master was tantamount to being sentenced to death. No matter who pleaded for mercy, it was useless. Bah! Another sniper shot rang out. This time, it hit Han Ji's left leg. Blood splattered, the bullet directly passed through the flesh of the thigh and quickly left. With a piercing wound, Han Ji fell to his knees with a plop, unable to move an inch. No! No! Tears fell like rain. Han Ji was so scared that he actually cried. If they had killed him directly, it might not have been so painful. However, this kind of torture was the best way to break a person's heart. Back then, there were many people who had been captured and tortured to death by him. Thinking about how they were unable to live or die, he even laughed out loud at that time. God made fools of people, who would have thought that it would be his turn now. Bah! Another shot hit him in the left shoulder. His body could not help but tilt, almost falling to the ground. Kill me, kill me. This feeling of facing death at any time made Han Ji's mind begin to collapse. At this time, he no longer hoped to live, only to die quickly, which was also a kind of happy relief. However, the gunshots that should have sounded did not continue, and everything seemed to be quiet. There was only the faint sound of blood flowing out of the body. After half an hour, about a third of the blood in his body had flowed out. Without any emergency treatment, Han Ji finally fell into a coma due to excessive blood loss. Then, he slowly died. Of course, they did not directly kill Han Ji because they did not want to let him off too easily. Feeling the feeling of death bit by bit was the result that Bai Zhua and the others wanted. The night wind blew, bringing with it the smell of blood, and then slowly dissipated into the air. The people living nearby only heard the crisp sound of firecrackers in the middle of the night, but no one knew what exactly happened, and no one had the courage to come out and take a look. It was not until the sky was completely bright that the people walked out of their houses. At this moment, the gate of the embroidered uniform guard's office was very lively, and 11 corpses, including Han Ji, were neatly lined up there. No one knew who sent these corpses, and the first people who found them were the soldiers of the warden's office patrolling the nearby 5 cities. The 11 people sent out were all dead, including Han Ji. When the news reached Lv Gui's ears, his face was pale and unsightly. Collect the corpses, send a coroner to examine them, and report the results to me. After saying this to his subordinates, Lv Gui plopped back into his chair. When he sent out this mission, Lv Gui did not think that it would fail. But even if he was mentally prepared, he did not think that they would fail so miserably, and that even Han Ji would be dead. Lv Gui understood Han Ji's subordinate quite well. He was not very courageous, and could bully people by relying on the might of the tiger, but he was not brave enough to take risks and fight with his life. Logically speaking, such a person would not follow an ordinary embroidered uniform guard to carry out a mission, but why did he die? Could it be that these mercenaries were really so powerful? When he thought of this, Lv Gui did not feel happy at all, and instead became very nervous. If it was really like this, would these mercenaries let it go? Would they come to find trouble with him because of this? Humans were like this. The losing side of a battle would always feel that they were weak, as if they were afraid that the other side would not let them go. But Lv Gui did not think about it. If he did not send people to investigate, how could there be such a result? Lv Gui was still dizzy in the room, and his mood was somewhat uneasy. The coroner he sent out returned with news that the 11 corpses were all killed by gunpowder, but unfortunately, there was no gunpowder residue found on their bodies. Looking at the wounds, it should be that the gunpowder that entered the bodies of the embroidered uniform guards was dug out after they died. Chapter 190. He's already dead. Why won't they let him go? This is going too far. After hearing the coroner's report, Lu Gui roared angrily. But before he could vent his anger, a subordinate came in to report that the Marquis of Loyalty Yang Chendong had arrived with 100 soldiers from the warden's office. They had already passed the gatehouse and were heading towards the inner courtyard. Upon hearing that Yang Chendong had arrived, Lu Gui immediately guessed his intentions. He immediately said anxiously, "Who let them in? Can't you stop them?" "Commander, we can't stop them. Marquis Yang has the command token of the embroidered uniform guard. None of us dared to stop him. The embroidered uniform guard who had reported the news replied with an aggrieved expression. Tell him that I'm not here. As Lu Gui spoke, he looked around. It was clear that he wanted to find a safe place to hide. Bang! With a muffled sound, the door was kicked open from the outside. Yang Chendong, with a murderous look, appeared in front of Lv Gui with hundreds of soldiers from the warden's office of the 5 cities. Ah! At first, there was a cry of alarm, but Lu Gui quickly reacted. He forced himself to remain calm and asked Yang Chendong in a questioning tone, Marquis Yang, what are you doing? Do you know what kind of crime it is to bring people into the embroidered uniform guard? Lu Gui's appearance at this moment was fierce on the outside but timid on the inside. In response to Lu Gui's howls and questioning, the soldiers of the warden's office standing opposite him all laughed coldly. This time, to be able to follow the Marquis of Loyalty into the embroidered uniform guard was a very glorious thing. With today's experience, it was likely that in the future, he would have something to brag about with his colleagues. In the past, it was always the embroidered uniform guard who found trouble with them. Everyone was a soldier and ate grain, but the treatment was very different. Now that Yang Chendong was here, it was different. How awe-inspiring was it to openly charge into the embroidered uniform guard to arrest someone? Just thinking about it made one's blood boil. Lv Gui was still shouting, still showing off his might. It could even be said that he was acting shamelessly. Yang Chendong snorted disdainfully and said, as the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, you still have the face to talk about Marquis. Do you know that last night, there were brothers from the embroidered uniform guard who went looking for trouble with the mercenaries? Because of this, they almost injured their people. Now that they are asking for an explanation from us, how do you think I should answer? Huh? When Yang Chendong asked this question, Lu Gui suddenly became weak. But when he thought about how Han Ji and the others were already dead, and how there was no evidence that he had sent them on a mission, he regained his confidence. What does this have to do with me? Han Ji and the others did it on their own accord. If you want an explanation, just look for them. Look for them? How can you even say that? You want Marquis to argue with the dead? Yang Chendong continued to ask angrily. But then, he suddenly stopped and his voice became much colder. Fine, you can deny it. Right now, those mercenaries want Marquis to give them an explanation. They even said that if they are not satisfied, they will immediately leave the capital. If Walla's army comes, you will be the one to face them. Humph. After explaining the seriousness of the matter, Yang Chendong did not waste any more words and turned to leave. He really came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Yang Chendong actually left just like that, causing Lu Gui to be a little confused. But when he thought about what Yang Chendong said, if the mercenaries really left because of this, then who would bear the responsibility of protecting the capital? Would it be him? It was not that he was looking down on himself, but Lu Gui really did not have the confidence to do this matter well. Even Ingzong and Shiheng with 500,000 soldiers had been defeated. How could he win against Walla? Wait, loyal Marquis, wait a moment. Considering the seriousness of the matter, Lu Gui had no choice but to shout. As he shouted, he quickly ran out. If he allowed Yang Chendong to leave just like that, he would be guilty of too much. Of course, Yang Chendong would not leave too quickly. Defending the capital and defeating Walla was part of his plan. Even if no one asked him to do it, he would still do it. What he said just now was just to scare the other party and to gain more benefits. How could he really let the mercenaries leave because of this? How could he really allow Walla, a foreign race, to bully the Han people? After hearing Lu Gui's shout, Yang Chendong naturally stopped. But when he turned around, he still had a serious expression and asked, Commander, why did you call for Marquis? Since you don't know about this matter, I'll ask Eunuch Jean. If Eunuch Jean doesn't care, then just let the mercenaries leave. This marquis will be able to put down the heavy burden of guarding the capital. Speaking of which, Marquis is still too young. When he took on this task, he was too loyal. Yang Chendong's words made LV Gue even more stunned after hearing it. When he heard that there would be such serious consequences, he knew that this was not something he could bear. Immediately, a smile appeared on his face. Marquis Yang, don't be anxious. Can we discuss this matter properly? Although Han Ji's actions were purely personal, he is still a member of the Imperial Guard. After thinking about it, this commander also has some responsibility. Marquis Yang, how do you want compensation? If the amount is not too large, this commander can do his part. Lu Gue admitted defeat. Yang Chendong smiled in his heart and his face brightened. Good, it's good that you have this attitude. As for the compensation, the mercenaries have already spoken to Marquis. 500,000 taels of silver can settle this matter. Lu Gue was originally smiling, but when he heard the number of 500,000 taels, he immediately jumped up. How much? This is impossible. No. Lu Gue was still waving his hands and shouting wildly as if he had been bitten. Yang Chendong snorted coldly. Forget it. Since the commander doesn't have it, I will ask Eunuch Jin. If he doesn't have it, then let them leave. Yang Chendong turned around and walked away. He didn't have the slightest reluctance, which made Lu Gue stunned. If the performer did not have an audience, what was the point of such a performance? Marquis Yang, don't be anxious. Let's discuss it again. Lu Gue continued to chase after Yang Chendong. In the palace, Jining, who had been paying attention to the situation, rushed to the emperor's resting quarters as soon as she received the news. The situation in the capital was not stable. In the past few days, many officials were sending their families out of the city. Due to the complicated and chaotic situation, there was no morning court. With Zhu Qiyu's permission, the court was changed from 1 day to one every 3 days. When Jining arrived at the palace, Zhu Qiyu was eating breakfast sent by the imperial kitchen. Oh, my beloved official, you are here. Have you eaten breakfast? Let's eat together. The emperor asked an official to accompany him for breakfast. This was already a great favor. Jining was overwhelmed by the favor. If it had been in the past, she would have sat down and served the emperor's breakfast. But now, she was not in the mood to do so. Your Majesty, is there a result from the mercenaries sent to test the waters? What result? Zhu Qiyu, who had been indifferent, stopped moving his chopsticks when he heard Jin Ying's words. He raised his head and asked seriously. There are good and bad results. Jining panicked when Zhu Qiyu looked at her. For a moment, she did not know how to describe what she wanted to say. What does my beloved official mean? Zhu Qiyu was also confused by her words. Perhaps she knew that her description was not appropriate, so Jining hurriedly explained, Your Majesty, the brocade guard followed your orders and went to the mercenaries' temporary camp last night. There were 11 people in total. 11 people died. This morning, they all fell in front of the brocade guard yamen. The people I sent to investigate have returned. Last night, they faintly heard the sound of gunfire. As he spoke, he observed Zhu Qiyu. When he found that Zhu Qiyu was listening attentively, he continued, This is the good news. Facts have proven that this mercenary group does indeed possess extraordinary strength, and they are very vigilant. But they asked for compensation on the grounds that someone was spying on their camp. They asked for 500,000 taels of silver. At this time, the Marquis of Loyalty is representing the mercenaries and communicating with the brocade guard commander Lu Gue. Zhu Qiyu's expression darkened as he listened to Jin Ying's report. When he knew that the mercenaries were strong, he had more confidence in the defense of the capital. But when he heard that the mercenaries were asking for 500,000 taels of silver as compensation for last night's spying, his expression changed drastically. He said, "Can you investigate whether anyone died last night?" "Your Majesty, the Marquis of Loyalty has already given us the answer. The mercenaries did not die. They were only disturbed for a moment." Jining repeated what Yang Chundong had said to Lu Gui. "No casualties? Then why did they ask for 500,000 taels of silver? Do they think that my silver and the national treasury's silver fell from the sky? How preposterous." Zhu Qiyu's face was filled with anger. It was obvious that he was angry. It was true that he was the emperor of a country. It was also true that he was wealthy. But the more he was like this, the more he valued his dignity more than anything else. The ones who had died were the brocade guard. The mercenaries had not only killed people, but they also wanted money. This was a threat and extortion. As the emperor of a country, if he backed down and agreed to the other party's request, wouldn't he be lowering his head? If that was the case, how could he lead a country in the future? Seeing that the emperor was angry, Jin Ying's expression turned bitter. The thing he was worried about had happened. The emperor wanted face. The mercenaries' actions had clearly touched his dragon scales. This was no longer a matter of 500,000 taels of silver. It was a matter of the country's dignity. Logically speaking, the mercenaries' actions were a little excessive. If it weren't for the fact that the other party had advanced firearms and powerful battle prowess, with Jin Ying's personality, he wouldn't have reported this matter to the emperor. Instead, he would have privately ordered the brocade guards and the East faction guards to arrest these people. At that time, he would use practical actions to tell the other party what they couldn't do and who they couldn't provoke. Chapter 191. But after what had happened last night, he truly didn't have the confidence to do such a thing. And now that the safety of the capital was in danger, he couldn't use violence to suppress the enemy. Otherwise, before Walla's army arrived, he would be thrown into chaos. After all, the emperor had spent a great deal of money to ask Yang Chundong to hire these mercenaries, so there could be no problems at this time. Otherwise, the defense of the capital would probably develop in the worst possible direction. And if Zhu Qiyu lost the capital, he would essentially lose the throne. In the south, there was still Ing Zong keeping an eye on this place. If there was a chance to deal a heavy blow to the throne, Ing Zong probably wouldn't show any mercy. If Zhu Qiyu was no longer the emperor, what was a great eunuch like him? When the time came, many people would probably try to capture him and bring him to Ing Zong to claim credit. Even if it was for her own sake, Jining still had to warn Zhu Qiyu. Even though she knew that he was currently in a bad mood, she still had to say what needed to be said. "Your Majesty, a lack of forbearance in small matters will spoil great plans. We've already spent 10 million taels of silver, so we don't mind spending another 500,000 taels. As long as your Majesty agrees, I can privately resolve this problem and do my best to prevent this matter from spreading. What does your Majesty think?" Jining wanted to ask Zhu Qiyu to back down. As soon as she said this, as the emperor of a country, of course he was displeased. He kept a straight face and didn't say yes or no. Zhu Qiyu truly didn't want to lower his head. This was the dignity of a country, not just a matter of 500,000 taels of silver. With his hands behind his back, Zhu Qiyu stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking into the distance. Although all he could see were tall and majestic palaces, it didn't stop him from expressing his feelings. He was very angry. Jining couldn't help but panic at Zhu Qiyu's cold attitude. "Your Majesty, this matter can't wait any longer. Please reconsider." The embroidered uniform guard had been the cause of this incident. If the mercenaries were allowed to leave and the capital was lost, all the blame would fall on the head eunuch. He would be the second Wang Zhen, and even the history books would record him as a sinner for all eternity. Therefore, in Jin Ying's heart, even if the mercenaries wanted to leave, it could not be because of the brocade guard. At this moment, he really regretted what he did last night. Jin Ying's pleas didn't get any response from Zhu Qiyu. He didn't even turn his head. It was as if he hadn't heard anything. What should we do? Jin Ying was very anxious, but as an official, there was nothing he could do about the emperor's attitude. All he could do was sigh in his heart. Reporting. Just as Jin Ying was feeling helpless and Zhu Qiyu was speechless, another chief eunuch, Ru Zhu, arrived outside the palace. As soon as he appeared, he knelt on the ground with a panicked expression, his body trembling slightly. Ru Zhu had only been a court eunuch in Dai Zong's time and hadn't been particularly outstanding. After Jin Ying took the throne, this man had quickly been promoted to supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, a position that had been guaranteed by the dead monk Qian. He was primarily responsible for communicating with the Bureau of Military Personnel and was in charge of military affairs. Jin Ying was standing at the gate. When he saw that it was Ru Zhu, he instinctively believed that the matter had gotten out of hand and that LV Gui had not received the decree and was not willing to pay, so the mercenaries were preparing to leave the capital. When he thought of this possibility, his face paled. Is there something important? There is. The Bureau of Military Personnel has just received news from scouts that the vanguard of the Walla army is less than 150 li from the capital. Tomorrow, they will appear at the walls of the capital. As Ru Zhu spoke, he raised his head, revealing a panicked expression. What? Repeat that for us. Zhu Qiyu, who had been facing away from the gate, finally turned around. Not only that, he quickly walked over to Ru Zhu, who was still kneeling on the ground. When Ru Zhu saw that the emperor was asking, he didn't dare to hesitate and immediately replied, "Reporting to your majesty, the Bureau of Military Personnel has sent news that the vanguard of the Walla army, 10,000 cavalry, is heading toward the capital. They are less than 150 li from here and will arrive at the city gates tomorrow." So fast? Hearing that the Walla cavalry would arrive at the city gates tomorrow, Zhu Qiyu's face became serious and panicked. The other party was an elite cavalry. Although there were only 10,000 of them, the 10,000 ordinary soldiers in the city couldn't compare to them. Although there wasn't much difference in numbers, more than half of the Great Ming Dynasty's elites had been lost in the Battle of the Tumu Fortress. Later on, when Admiral Shiheng led the troops to battle, he had taken the remaining elites with him. Now, there was only a second-rate army left in the city. How could they stop the Walla army? Thinking that the Walla army would be at the foot of the capital tomorrow and that they might charge into the capital tomorrow, his position as emperor might come to an end, he couldn't help but stagger a few steps and his body became unstable. Jin Ying reacted quickly and quickly reached out to support Zhu Qiyu, who was 30 years younger than her, and asked with concern, "Your Majesty, are you all right?" "Zhen is fine, fine. Beloved subject, the enemy's cavalry is about to arrive. What can we do?" Zhu Qiyu no longer had the stern look on his face. In exchange, he was panicking and lost his mind. It had to be said that Zhu Qiyu was miserable enough. He wasn't even 22 years old, but under the urging of his officials, he had taken over a mess in this chaotic world. Then, accidents happened again and again. He, who hadn't fully grasped the imperial power, was like a small boat in the ocean that could be swallowed by the waves at any time. How could he not be nervous and afraid? "Your Majesty, it's fine, it's fine. Don't we still have the mercenaries? Moreover, the loyal Marquis has already taken charge of guarding the capital. It's time for them to show their loyalty to the country," Jin Ying advised as she supported Zhu Qiyu. Right, there's still the loyal Marquis and the mercenaries. How about this? Immediately take out 500,000 taels of silver from the national treasury to the loyal Marquis and the mercenaries. But remember, last night's incident was the embroidered uniform guard acting on their own. It has nothing to do with us. This silver can only be considered what the embroidered uniform guard owes us. In this dire situation, Zhu Qiyu finally relented, but he did not forget the dignity of the sovereign of a country. Jining also knew that in this situation, this was not the time to haggle over the 500,000 taels of silver, so she immediately agreed. Your Majesty, be at ease. This subject will handle this matter and will definitely handle it beautifully. I will not lose face and decorum for the imperial household. Good, good. With beloved subject handling matters, we are at ease. Quickly go and handle it, Zhu Qiyu said with a hint of anxiety. At this moment, all his hopes were placed on Yang Chendong and the mercenaries he had spent a fortune to hire. The Yamen of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. LV Gui was currently drinking tea with Yang Chendong. The two of them did not communicate much, but in their hearts, they both knew that they were waiting for news from the imperial palace. After all, this involved 500,000 taels of silver and the imperial household's face. The final decision still needed the emperor's decree. Yang Chendong, who was sipping his tea unhurriedly, showed enough confidence at this moment. He insisted that Zhu Qiyu would definitely give in. All of this came from the news he had received last night. The Walla's vanguard cavalry of 10,000 people was approaching the Great Ming Dynasty's capital. If nothing unexpected happened, they would arrive at the city tomorrow. The Yangxia Security Bureau was willing to spend a lot of silver and gold. The information they received was even earlier than the Great Ming Dynasty's imperial household. However, this news would probably reach the imperial palace today and reach Zhu Qiyu's ears. Then, the new emperor would have no choice but to give in. Speaking of which, Yang Chendong did not lack the 500,000 taels of silver. However, he insisted on doing this to warn all parties not to easily inquire about the mercenaries. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. Presumably, after what happened this morning, whoever had such an idea would have to think twice before acting. Maintaining the mystery of the mercenaries was also of great significance for future actions. This was also part of the plan to pave the way for some future actions. With such a significance, in order to achieve the goal, what could he do even if he had to confront the genie guards? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he did not do it openly at this time, he was afraid that it would be more troublesome to do it in the future. Yang Chendong's indifference and confidence in LV Gui's eyes made him even more anxious. Unconsciously, there was a difference in the momentum between the two people. Psychologically, Yang Chendong had already won a round. LV Gui even had a thought in his heart that it was better not to provoke this person in the future. Because no matter what, it seemed that he would be the one to suffer in the end. In the past, LV Gui would not have dared to think that someone would dare to cause trouble in the genie guards. It was good enough that he did not bring people to cause trouble. Who would dare to take the initiative to come to the door? But today, not only did it happen, but he also had no way to deal with it. This made it difficult for him. In his heart, he only wanted the emperor and eunuch Jin to quickly make a decision. He even faintly thought in his heart, wasn't it just 500,000 taels of silver? Just give it to the loyal marquis. LV Gui's heart had already begun to show weakness. It was at this time that Ru Zhu arrived. At the same time, he brought the emperor's oral decree for the genie guards commander LV Gui. In the inner hall of the genie guards, LV Gui knelt to receive the imperial decree, appearing extremely respectful. It was worth mentioning that Yang Chendong only stood up from the chair when Ru Zhu was about to deliver the emperor's decree. He did not have the slightest intention of kneeling on the ground. Just this kind of behavior was a great disrespect. Logically speaking, it was enough to arrest him. But at this time, whether it was the supervising eunuch Ru Zhu or the genie guards commander LV Gui, they cleverly pretended not to see. At this time, it was not the time to have a dispute. Chapter 192. His Majesty's verbal decree. The genie guards acted recklessly and attracted the displeasure of the mercenaries, so they should be punished. But considering the national crisis, Zhen will remember this matter. As for the 500,000 taels, Zhen will withdraw it from the national treasury first. Later, Zhen will slowly deduct it from the genie guard's yamen. Also, I hope Lu Gui can learn from this lesson and control his subordinates well. Don't do things that are not beneficial to the country. With a serious face and warning tone, Ru Zhu reprimanded Lu Gui on behalf of the emperor. Finally, there was a result, and it was the compensation method he had thought of. Lv Gui breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He was not worried about being reprimanded at all. This matter was originally the emperor's idea. He was just taking the blame on behalf of others. Nothing would happen. This subject receives the decree and thanks His Majesty's grace. Lu Gui knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to show respect to the emperor. After Ru Zhu finished telling Lu Gui about the emperor's instructions, he turned to Yang Chendong and said, "Loyal Marquis, the emperor also has a verbal decree for you. This subject receives the decree." Yang Chendong cupped his fists. His face was very respectful, but the words he said were not respectful at all, asking the envoy to pass on my behalf. This subject fell off a horse during the Battle of Earth and Wood, which triggered an old injury. Now, I can't kneel, asking for forgiveness. When Zhu Qiueving's sect was still alive, he let Yang Chendong organize 3rd Princess Changda's birthday banquet. To put it bluntly, he was just looking for trouble out of jealousy. At that time, after Yang Chendong organized the birthday banquet, in order to not give others an excuse to deal with him, he lied that he fell off a horse and injured his body. Now, he said that he fell off a horse during the Battle of Earth and Wood, which triggered an old injury, so he couldn't kneel. Speaking of which, it was a coincidence. But he didn't think about it. The current Yang Chendong wasn't even 20 years old. Even if he really suffered an injury, at this age, he should have recovered. However, he still used this as an excuse. It was clear that he did not respect the imperial power. When Ru Zhu heard this, he was dissatisfied. However, considering that it was time to put the other party in an important position, if he haggled over such a small matter and delayed the important matter, the gains would not make up for the losses. Thus, he could only close one eye and say, "It's fine." The emperor's verbal order is only for the Marquis of Zhongdan and this eunuch to discuss how to retreat from the enemy. Right, Walla's vanguard cavalry will arrive at the capital tomorrow, but how will the loyal Marquis deal with them? As the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Ru Zhu had the authority to give orders on military matters. At this moment, he was asking about how to deal with the enemy. Naturally, it was within the scope of his authority, so it was reasonable. Of course, Yang Chendong knew who Ru Zhu was. He also knew that Ru Zhu was here on behalf of the imperial power. To put it bluntly, Ru Zhu was here to supervise the army and monitor his every move. This was also one of the characteristics of the Great Ming Dynasty. No matter where the war occurred, no matter how large the scale of the war, there would always be eunuchs participating in supervising the army. This was also a sign that the emperor wanted to control everything in his hands. However, he did not know that it was a great taboo for someone who did not know how to fight to lead an army. Just like in Tumu Castle, Guojing, as the supervising eunuch, played a role in restricting the Great Ming Dynasty's elite army, causing them to lose the best opportunity to fight due to internal friction and suffer a crushing defeat. With the previous example, how could Yang Chendong allow eunuchs to participate in military matters? Immediately, he replied with a serious expression, "Eunuch Ru, as for how to deal with the enemy, I still need to discuss with the mercenaries. Of course, with the 500,000 taels of silver, we can show our sincerity. As for how to fight the war, I'm afraid that right now, it's not up to you or me to decide. So it's like this. However, I don't know if this eunuch can go with the loyal Marquis to take a look at the mercenaries' barracks?" Ru Zhu said with a modest expression. This was also Zhu Qiu's intention. Although it was true that the mercenaries were invited by Yang Chendong, they were using his money. He couldn't monopolize them, could he? If possible, he would have his own people contact the mercenaries. If he could use them, wouldn't it be better? He wouldn't have to trouble the loyal Marquis with everything. To put it bluntly, he was burning the bridge after crossing the river. Zhu Qiyu wanted to get rid of Yang Chendong, the middleman. Among the people, this was called forgetting one's mother after getting a wife. How could Yang Chendong not see through this little trick? No one knew that the mercenaries were actually the new Yangxia army under his command. The only reason he didn't reveal this relationship was because the timing wasn't right. As for people wanting to take advantage of the cold front, he wasn't worried at all. It was simply a waste of wax for a blind man to light a lamp. Because it wasn't time to reveal this relationship, Yang Chendong wouldn't make any decisions on behalf of the mercenaries. Instead, he said to Ru Zhu with a smile, "Eunuch Ru wants to go to the mercenaries' barracks to take a look. Marquis naturally welcomes you. However, I can't make the decision on their side. If something unpleasant happens, I hope that Eunuch Ru won't be angry." Hearing that Yang Chendong allowed it, Ru Zhu's face was immediately filled with joy. As long as this person didn't obstruct him, he was confident that he could make friends with the mercenaries. After all, the other party came to make money. Whose money wasn't money? He had the emperor as his backing and the national treasury's silver as his backing. As long as he was willing to spend money, he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't be able to convince the mercenaries. As if afraid that Yang Chendong would go back on his word, Ru Zhu hurriedly said, "No problem, no problem. When the time comes, just introduce me to them. As for the other matters, I'll take care of them." "Good, then prepare the silver and set out." Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. "Good, good." Ru Zhu hurriedly agreed. Then he turned to Lu Gui and said, "Commander, I'll have to trouble you to send some people to escort 500,000 taels of silver from the national treasury to the mercenaries' compound." "Thank you for your trouble." Ru Zhu and Lu Gui were both Eunuch Jin's trusted aides. Their positions were also very close, so it was natural for them to be polite. To this, Lu Gui also politely replied, "It's my duty, it's my duty. I'll arrange for people to do it right away." The morning's questioning finally had a result. In the end, it ended with the imperial power backing down. Of course, to the outside world, this was the embroidered uniform guards backing down, not the emperor backing down. The 100 embroidered uniform guards pushed out 10 large carriages. In each carriage, there were 10 large chests. A total of 500,000 taels of silver headed straight for the mercenaries' barracks. As if afraid that Yang Chendong would do something bad, when Lu Gui went to arrange for people to go to the national treasury to get the silver, Ru Zhu accompanied him the entire time. He really didn't leave his side and didn't give him any space or time to spread the news. However, what Ru Zhu didn't know was that when Yang Chendong faced him, he stood with his hands behind his back. The hands behind his back were constantly making gestures to convey what he wanted to say. All of this was clearly seen by Tiger's Mane, who was standing behind him as a servant. After understanding what the young master wanted to say, he quietly left. Ru Zhu didn't care about this at all. He only wanted to keep an eye on Yang Chendong so that he didn't spread the news, especially not to the mercenaries. Other people and matters were not within his scope of concern. Just like this, Ru Zhu accompanied Yang Chendong until the silver was prepared. Only then did Ru Zhu happily ask the loyal Marquis to accompany him to the mercenaries' courtyard. Yang Chendong gladly agreed, and the group left the embroidered uniform guards' yamen in a grandiose manner. Along the way, this group quickly attracted the attention of the common people they encountered. Spies from the Bureau of Security had already been planted in the crowd. With their intentional spread, the news that the embroidered uniform guard was looking for trouble with the mercenaries protecting the capital quickly spread. Many common people began to reprimand the embroidered uniform guard, and the balance of public opinion began to tilt in favor of the mercenaries. Leading public opinion for one's own use had not been noticed at the time, but Yang Chendong knew that in many cases, obtaining the support of the common people was already half the battle. Of course, there was no need for him to explain these things that would later be regarded as the truth to others. There was a wide road in front of the mercenaries' courtyard. He had only chosen this place because he had considered the problem of gathering an army. When Yang Chendong and Ru Zhu arrived, it naturally didn't feel crowded at all. This place is not bad. Loyal Marquis is quite considerate. Ru Zhu seemed intent on getting close to Yang Chendong, and he would only be satisfied with a few words of praise for this courtyard. Regarding this, Yang Chendong only smiled without saying anything. He naturally knew what the other party was thinking. If it weren't for the fact that he was still useful, the other party would have already coldly glared at him and even tried to make trouble for him. For this eunuch who had no emotions and only cared about profit and power, Yang Chendong was already giving him a lot of face by showing him some courtesy. As for any words of thanks or praise, that was simply out of the question. Since the cold vanguard had already entered the capital, no one would be able to make things difficult for him in the future. This was a display of his confidence. Yang Chendong's nonchalant attitude and silent smile along the way was seen by Ru Zhu, and in exchange, he sneered coldly in his heart. He had already decided that once he got involved with the mercenaries, the loyal Marquis would just go wherever he wanted to go. Even eunuchs would look down on nobles who relied on the power of others. At the entrance of the courtyard, four cold vanguard soldiers stood at attention. They held a black and cold 95 style in their hands, and the gleaming bayonets on the body of the spear gave off an intimidating aura. How mighty! Ru Zhu praised sincerely after seeing the might of the four mercenaries from afar. As they spoke, the group arrived at the entrance of the courtyard. Four gleaming bayonets were placed horizontally in front of everyone. This is an important military area. Unrelated people are not allowed to disturb us. Please leave quickly, or else bear the consequences. The four cold vanguard soldiers didn't show the slightest hint of fear despite the size of the group. On the contrary, they even took the initiative to speak. Chapter 193. Yang Chendong stood in the middle of the crowd and watched all of this with an indifferent expression. He had no intention of walking out. He had not come into contact with the cold front for a long time. He also wanted to see the mental state of this troop from the side. Ru Zhu stood in the front row of the crowd. Especially when he was about to reach the entrance of the courtyard, he intentionally quickened his pace. His intention to seize the opportunity was very obvious. Yang Chendong was happy to see this happen. That was because he knew that the cold front would not treat Ru Zhu well just because of some silver. If they really did that, it would be equivalent to being expelled from the cold front. Only with iron discipline would an iron army appear. Yang Chendong was very confident in this point. However, some people did not know about this. After seeing that the front was blocked, Ru Zhu took the initiative to walk out. He then put on a smile on his face and bowed respectfully as he said, "Brothers, please allow me to report. I am a supervising eunuch of the Great Ming's Imperial Horse Directorate. This time, I am here to deliver the silver. Do you think you can let us pass? Step back. If you take half a step forward, you will be killed without mercy." In response to Ru Zhu's attempt to curry favor with him, the platoon leader of the cold front, who was standing guard at the entrance, had a serious expression on his face. At the same time, he pulled the bolt of the 95 style gun in his hand and a murderous aura spread out in all directions. In the past, Ru Zhu was only an internal envoy. When had he ever seen such a scene? He was immediately frightened and involuntarily stepped back. His mouth trembled as he said, "This eunuch is really here to deliver the silver. If you don't believe me, you can call your general out to verify my authenticity. Who is making a racket outside the courtyard? Do you know that this is a military area? Unrelated people are not allowed to come near." A shout came from inside the gate. Then, the sound of orderly footsteps could be heard. Soon after, a dozen or so cold front soldiers led by Teng Shan walked out of the courtyard. As soon as these people appeared, they raised the 95 style and held it in their hands. Then, they coldly stared at the great Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guards outside the door with hawk-like eyes. It was as if they were ready to fight if they didn't get along. The embroidered uniform guards were considered ferocious. Who knew how many people were bullied by them? From commoners to merchants, to officials and nobles, who wouldn't tremble when they saw them, afraid that they would be remembered? This also made them feel superior to others. But for some reason, the moment he saw Ling Feng, a chill rushed out from the soles of his feet. It felt as if he was being targeted by a ferocious tiger and could become a piece of meat in its stomach at any moment. Some of the more timid embroidered uniform guards didn't even know where to put their hands and feet. They just lowered their heads and didn't say a word. Ru Zhu also felt a chill spreading from his head to his feet. He did not know that this was because Teng Shan and the others had killed too many people on Little Ryukyu Island. However, no matter how scared he was, since he received the imperial order, he always wanted to complete the mission. After he raised his head and saw Teng Shan's murderous aura, he immediately lowered his head. Then, he tried to use a negotiating tone and said, "General, I am a supervising eunuch of the Great Ming's Imperial Horse Directorate. This time, I am here on the orders of our emperor to deliver silver to you." Deliver silver? Hearing Ru Zhu's words, Teng Shan's murderous aura seemed to have cooled down a lot. Sensing that the other party's tone seemed to have loosened, Ru Zhu thought to himself that silver was indeed the most useful thing. He immediately said, "Yes, yes, we are here to deliver silver to you. However, how should I address you, General? Are you the highest-ranking leader here? This battalion commander isn't the highest-ranking leader? What? Are you looking down on this battalion commander's low position?" Teng Shan looked at Ru Zhu with an ice-cold gaze. His murderous aura reappeared. Ru Zhu only asked about the other party's identity and position because he wanted to get to know the other party's higher-ups in the shortest time possible and establish a good relationship with them. He really didn't have any other intentions. However, after being reminded by Teng Shan and thinking about his previous behavior, he seemed to be a little too impatient. For a moment, Ru Zhu regretted his impatient actions. He opened his mouth and said, "No, no, this general misunderstood. This eunuch didn't mean that. Humph. Leave your money and get out of here." Teng Shan had no intention of listening to Ru Zhu's explanation. He seemed to have been angered by Ru Zhu's words. At this moment, he waved his hand and looked like he was going to chase them away. "Leave your silver and scram." This was completely different from what Ru Zhu had imagined. For a moment, he couldn't accept it. "General, shouldn't you call your leader over and discuss this?" Bang, 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 a series of gunshots rang out, and the tiles on the roof of the house opposite the courtyard were broken into countless pieces. Then, the tiles fell from above, raising waves of dust. Teng Shan opened fire. This was how he answered Ru Zhu's question. Facts speak louder than words. After a series of gunshots, all the brocade-gowned guards present were stunned on the spot. Then, someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Next, the brocade-gowned guards gave up on their carriages and retreated in large strides. Ru Zhu was also in the crowd. In fact, his speed of retreat was not slower than anyone else. It had to be said that in the face of life-threatening danger, even a eunuch's reaction could be surprisingly fast. Everyone was retreating. Soon, Yang Chendong, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Qiu Vi of the first guard who had been standing in the crowd appeared. Initially, when Teng Shan saw that some people did not retreat, he revealed a trace of anger. He wanted to teach them a lesson for ignoring his cold front. However, when the crowd retreated and Yang Chendong stood at the very front, Teng Shan, who originally had a ferocious look on his face and looked like he would attack at any moment, immediately turned into astonishment, followed by excitement and agitation. His originally straight and strong legs now looked like they were about to bend and kneel on the ground. The earliest cold front was personally trained by Yang Chendong. Even Ling Feng, who was in his later years, had only heard legends about the sixth young master. It could be said that in the most elite of the cold front, if there was only one person who could not be disrespected, and who everyone respected and had to give a thumbs up to, it would be Yang Chendong. Even Commander Ling Song of the army, although he also had the word Ling in his name, he only wore the army's Ling Feng uniform. It was more like in the navy, Commander Gao Xiong's uniform. However, with only Yang Chendong, no matter if it was the army, the navy, or even the air force who were practicing hot air balloons, they all respected him. He had a godlike reputation. When Ting Shan saw him, how could he not want to kneel on the ground? Cough. With a soft cough, Yang Chendong could tell what Ting Shan was going to do and what kind of performance he was going to show. He immediately reminded him. Although the cough was not loud, it shocked Ting Shan like a sudden clap of thunder. When he saw Commander Ru and a group of Imperial guards looking at him from the corner of his eyes, he finally remembered where he was and what kind of situation he was in. Ting Shan forcefully put away his thoughts of kneeling and bowing to Yang Chendong. Then, he made a gesture of inviting him in. Following Ting Shan's action, all the cold front soldiers standing on both sides of him straightened their bodies as if they were soldiers waiting for the king to inspect them. Some of these cold front soldiers were personally trained by Yang Chendong, some of their military ranks were taught by the sixth young master, and some of them did not know Yang Chendong. However, this did not stop them from expressing their respect for the young master. He really wanted to say something to these brothers, even if it was just to pat them on the shoulder and give them some encouragement. However, Yang Chendong knew that this was not the time to do this. If he appeared too close to the mercenaries, it would be hard to avoid suspicion. This would not be beneficial to his next plan. With his back facing Commander Ru and the others, Yang Chendong could only smile at these cold front soldiers. However, this smile was like the sun in the cold winter, making these brothers feel a warmth from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, their hearts were beating rapidly. This was the godlike sixth young master, and he was smiling at them. With this experience, they would be able to brag about it for a while when they returned to Crimson City. Ting Shan also suppressed the excitement in his heart. After Yang Chendong stepped into the courtyard, he quickly followed him. At this moment, a large group of people had already knelt down in the courtyard. The leaders were Commander Leng Song and Battalion Commander Wu Sheng. "Welcome, sixth young master." The voice was low, but it was more like the ray of sunlight before dawn, ready to explode with powerful energy at any time. "Brothers, thank you for your hard work." Facing close to 300 cold front soldiers, Yang Chendong was also very excited. In his eyes, these were his children. They were created by him, and they were also his pride. The words "thank you for your hard work" caused many cold front soldiers who would not even blink in the face of death to cry. Perhaps to them, these were the words they had been waiting for. Yang Chendong was also very excited in his heart. At this time, he felt as if he had returned to the barracks of his previous life, and saw those outstanding soldiers he had brought with him. This made him unable to calm down. However, Yang Chendong, who had lived 2 lives, knew what he wanted to protect, what he pursued, and what his dreams were. In order to achieve this final goal, he could not do whatever he wanted at this moment. Hence, he suppressed the excitement in his heart and walked in front of Leng Song. He patted his shoulder and said, "Not bad, you're more sturdy than before." "Thank you, sixth young master, for your praise." Leng Song, who did not like to smile and always had a stern face in the eyes of the soldiers, actually smiled at this moment. His smile was so carefree, so natural, and so sincere. Chapter 194. He walked up to Ting Shan, who had just returned to his unit, and lightly nodded. Extending a hand, he smoothed out Ting Shan's uniform. "Very good. You're much more spirited than before. Thank you, sixth young master, for your praise, Teng Shan replied in a low voice, suppressing his excitement. Taking another step forward, Yang Chendong arrived in front of Wu Sheng. Extending his right hand, he formed a fist and punched Wu Sheng's chest. Very good. I heard that you've worked very hard. Now that you're a battalion commander, keep it up. Wu Sheng did not complain after being punched. On the contrary, he excitedly called out, "Sixth young master, please be at ease. Wu Sheng will definitely perform even better and strive to become regimental commander as soon as possible, surpassing regiment commander Leng Song and becoming his commanding officer." This cry immediately drew laughter from the other members of the Cold Front. One by one, it took him a full hour to greet each of his brothers. He could still call out the names of some of them, but he didn't recognize some of them. However, this didn't stop them from quickly becoming friends and brothers. Leng Song, Teng Shan, and Wu Sheng followed at Yang Chendong's side, introducing each of their unfamiliar brothers to him, recounting the contributions they had made, the areas in which they had excelled, and their individual characteristics. In this hour, Yang Chendong had gained a deeper understanding of the 300 Cold Front members. At this moment, the 500,000 taels of silver had been carried into the courtyard. Even the Cold Front members who had been guarding the gate had entered the courtyard to greet the sixth young master. Very good. Your performance has greatly pleased this young master. You truly live up to the name of the Cold Front. Once everyone stood in line in front of Yang Chendong, the founder of the Cold Front began to speak. The Cold Front is like the cold edge of a weapon. But it has a purpose, and it is unyielding, unstoppable, and invincible. Today, you were able to stand out from the rest of the Cold Front and come to the capital, come to this young master's side. This is even more proof of your excellence, that you are outstanding members of the Cold Front. For this reason, this young master is proud of you. After a round of encouragement, Yang Chendong sensed that the morale of the Cold Front soldiers had risen to an unprecedented level. Yang Chendong's face, which was originally full of smiles, suddenly changed and became much more serious. I don't care what kind of glorious past you have and what kind of outstanding performance you have. But now, this young master hopes that you can forget everything about the past and face the reality before you again. That is, you will be fighting against 10, 100, or even 1,000 people by yourself. I wonder if you can do it? Yes. With a low growl, the veins on the necks of the Cold Front members tightened, as if they would burst at any moment. This was their way of expressing their desire for victory and their confidence in themselves. Very good. Now, I give the order for those who should rest to rest. The 3 battalion commanders, come with me. Yang Chendong knew that tomorrow's battle would descend, so in order for the soldiers to face the enemy with full energy and vigor, he gave the order for them to rest. With the order to disperse, the 300 Cold Front members left in an orderly fashion. There was not the slightest bit of panic in the process. This was the performance of a true elite force. From this, one could see that the great effort Yang Chendong had put into training them in formation had been effective. Leng Song, Teng Shan, and Wu Sheng followed Yang Chendong to a secret room deep within the courtyard. Xiao Vi led a group of guards to search the place. After confirming that there was nothing suspicious or dangerous, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei flanked Yang Chendong on either side. It wasn't that Yang Chendong didn't trust Leng Feng's team, but as a leader, he should have such an imposing manner. It was said that sometimes, distance makes the heart grow fonder. Between a superior and a subordinate, there should be enough distance. Otherwise, if the relationship was too close, there would be a lack of mystery. Naturally, when he wanted to lead them, the words he said would be somewhat discounted. Tiger's Mane and the other's actions were seen by Leng Song and the other 2. If it were anyone else who dared to treat them like this, they would have been furious and would have even taken out their weapons to fight. However, this was allowed by the 6th young master, so they did not dare to show the slightest displeasure or displeasure. Speaking of which, all of this was thanks to Luan Shaochen, Mo Chengyu, and the other political instructors. It was because of the existence of these political instructors that they constantly told the Cold Front members about the brilliance and greatness of the sixth young master. Gradually, everyone began to view Yang Chendong as a god. Because of this, who would dare to disobey his orders? Not to mention disobeying anything, if anyone dared to say anything bad about the sixth young master, who knew how many people would put that person to death in an instant. At this point, even Leng Song, the only regiment commander in the army, did not dare to have any other thoughts or actions. Perhaps a regiment commander's position was already very high, and could be said to be the true commander of the army. But if he dared to say that Yang Chendong was not good, he was afraid that even the brothers who had the best relationship with him would turn against him because of this. This was the power of political instructors. They were able to eliminate the possibility of betrayal from the Cold Front members. Yang Chendong sat at the head of the table. Tiger's Mane then spread out a map that he had already drawn on the table. Yang Chendong pointed at it and said, "Come and see." Outside the courtyard, looking at the closed door, Ru Zhu was not willing to leave like this. Thus, he did not leave. Instead, he stood on the street and waited. However, this wait lasted for more than 2 hours. Fortunately, there was an accompanying eunuch who got a wooden stool for him to sit on. Otherwise, he would not have been able to hold on. Why hasn't the loyal Marquis come out yet? Could it be that something has happened? One of the accompanying embroidered uniform guard Baihu saw that so much time had passed, but there was still no movement from the small courtyard. He could not help but ask suspiciously. "Don't speak nonsense." Ru Zhu's face stiffened, as if he was reprimanding him. However, in his heart, he was thinking that it would be best if something happened to Yang Chendong. If that was the case, the matter of communicating with the mercenaries would fall to him. At that time, he would be able to reap a lot of benefits. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Just as Ru Zhu was thinking about this, the door suddenly opened. Yang Chendong, dressed in green, walked out in large strides. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, Ru Zhu's eyes were fixed on him. He wanted to see if there would be any important figures from the mercenaries coming out to see him off. If that was the case, he could take the opportunity to say a few words and get familiar with them first. Unfortunately, only Yang Chendong and his servants came out. Not a single mercenary came out to see them off. This caused Ru Zhu's face to be filled with disappointment. However, what he did not know was that the disappointment was yet to come. After Yang Chendong walked out of the courtyard, he directly came to Ru Zhu and said with a serious expression, "Eunuch Ru, I have already tried my best to communicate with the mercenary generals. However, they did not agree to a eunuch being in charge of the army. They also said that since they have received the money, they naturally would not let the Walla army take the capital." After saying this, Yang Chendong shrugged his shoulders, looking as if he was powerless. Ru Zhu felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was frozen in place for who knew how long before he came back to his senses. At this time, Yang Chendong had already walked past him, heading in the direction of the immortal abode with his servants. "Wait a moment, Marquis Yang. What is going on here? The imperial supervisor has always been in the Great Ming Dynasty. Why are they making an exception now?" "I don't think this will work," Ru Zhu said with a face full of unwillingness. He had already patted his chest in front of the emperor and Ji Ning, saying that he would use the war as an opportunity to establish a good relationship with the mercenaries. He would also do his best to obtain a few new firearms, providing the best specimens for the Great Ming Dynasty's development. But now, even his authority to supervise the army had been taken away. Didn't that mean that this wish could no longer be fulfilled? Yang Chendong stopped in his tracks when Ru Zhu called out to him. He suddenly turned around and said, "Eunuch Ru, you said that this is the law of the Great Ming Dynasty, but these people do not belong to the Great Ming, so they do not need to follow it. Of course, if Eunuch Ru is not satisfied, you can ask them yourself. However, if you provoke their displeasure, then you will have to take responsibility for the consequences. Right, I must remind you that the vanguard cavalry of the Walla will arrive tomorrow. It would be best if nothing unexpected were to happen. As if it was a kind reminder, Yang Chendong turned around and left with a hearty laugh, leaving behind a stunned Ru Xing. He was filled with unwillingness and resentment. Of course, he wanted to do as Yang Chendong said and ask the mercenaries about the great Ming dynasty's rules. However, after the embroidered uniform guard's reckless actions last night, he didn't dare to do that again. What if he really angered them and they demanded money again? He had already paid 500,000 taels. He had already lost face once. Was he going to lose face a second time? AI. Ru Zhu let out a long sigh. He knew that he would not be able to complete the decree this time. He really didn't know that the emperor would be so furious after finding out about this. It seemed that he still needed to greet eunuch Ji Ning and protect his current position first. As for forming a good relationship with the mercenaries, once the war started, it wouldn't end in a day or two. When the time came, an opportunity should appear. Putting aside the fact that Ru Zhu went to the palace to find Ji Ning and reported what happened to the emperor, it caused Zhu Qiyu to be extremely angry. The news quickly spread in the city that the 10,000 elite vanguard cavalry of the Walla would arrive in the capital tomorrow. When the news came out, the entire city was terrified. Some people began to pack their bags and prepare to leave the capital. Some cowards who had nowhere else to go began to pray at home, hoping that the great Ming dynasty's army could win a battle and defeat the wolves of the Walla. Chapter 195. The capital, which had just regained its peace due to the low price of rice, was once again bustling with activity. In the immortal abode, the girls were also affected. They all came over to ask Yang Chendong, who was practicing calligraphy, what was going on outside. Why was the commander still so calm when the battle was about to begin? Yang Chendong had unknowingly become obsessed with writing. In his last life, he had been running all over the place to complete missions. How could he possibly find the time to compose himself and write? Now that he finally had the time and opportunity, he naturally had to put in some effort. At the very least, when he inscribed words for someone in the future, they wouldn't look too bad. Sixth brother, sixth brother. A series of feminine voices came from outside the study. Yang Chendong, who was in the middle of writing, sighed softly. He knew that his plans to practice calligraphy today had been dashed. He only had 4 women, and it was already so lively. He really didn't know what it would be like with the addition of other women in the future. At this moment, Yang Chendong suddenly missed the old Yang clan residence in Jianghu Manor. Back then, he could really do whatever he wanted, and no one would bother him. While Yang Chendong was still reminiscing about the old days, Hu Yan and the other 3 girls ran in. As soon as they saw Yang Chendong still holding the pen, they immediately surrounded him, and for a while, they kept asking him questions. Yang Chendong couldn't tell who was asking what, but he had a rough idea of what was going on. The 4 women all wanted to know if they could defeat the Walla cavalry tomorrow. That was the cavalry that had defeated Ing Zong and Shi Heng. They were all worried for Yang Chendong. Well, your husband knows what you are worried about. How about this? Tomorrow, all of you will put on makeup and go to the battlefield with Lu Lang. What do you think? Yang Chendong suddenly raised his voice and said something that shocked the 4 women. Since ancient times, it had been an ironclad rule that men should fight on the battlefield and women should stay at home. Apart from Hua Mulan and the female generals of the Yang clan, very few women were allowed to fight on the battlefield. However, Yang Chendong just had to make this request. How could these women not be shocked? Lu Lang, are you okay? Can we go to the battlefield too? Hu Yan's face was filled with disbelief. At the same time, her face was flushed red. Obviously, this proposal had touched her nerves and made her begin to yearn for it. Of course, I've already prepared your clothes. I borrowed them from the mercenaries and put them in your room. Take them and see if they fit you." Yang Chendong's eyes were as clear as a spring, and his face was full of love. When the four women heard this, they immediately ignored Yang Chendong and walked towards their rooms. After a short while, the four girls in camouflage uniforms returned to Yang Chendong. They were also in camouflage uniforms. When the four women wore the custom-made camouflage uniforms, their graceful figures were immediately highlighted. They actually had such a temperament and were so different from the rest. Hu Yan and the other two women looked at each other and chattered non-stop. Only Qiao Yin, who knew the truth, kept smiling. She knew that these clothes were not borrowed at all. They had already arranged for the garment factory in Crimson City to make them according to the women's figures. At that time, the concept of men being superior to women was very serious. Even the few men who loved their wives would be called a lioness from Hedong. Sometimes, these men had to worry about other people's opinions and do some things that hurt women. Only Yang Chendong really doted on his women. When he did things, he did not care about other people's opinions and thoughts. While the women were satisfied with the military uniform, they were even more satisfied with Yang Chendong's attitude towards them. This was what made them happy. Seeing the four women slowly calm down from their excitement, Yang Chendong smiled and said, "These clothes are not for you to wear for free. There is a mission." "Ah. There is a mission? What mission?" When Hu Yan and the other two women heard that there was a mission, their breathing became a lot more rapid. They even wondered if Lu Lang really wanted them to go to the battlefield. But what could they do without the strength to truss a chicken? The four women looked at him suspiciously. Yang Chendong chuckled and said, "What are you thinking? How can I be willing to let you fight the enemy? Your task is to record the most wonderful scene on the battlefield, then go back and edit it into a program for more people to watch, and completely spread the glorious image of Lu Lang." Yang Chendong said very arrogantly. Hu Yan and the other two women laughed. But after laughing, they felt deeply gratified. Since Lu Lang dared to let them walk around the battlefield, it was enough to show that he was full of confidence in this battle. In fact, this was the real reason why Yang Chendong wanted to take the women to the battlefield. If he wanted to make a program, he could have learned it from the soldiers who participated in the battle in the future. But he did not do that. Instead, he wanted to take them with him. He wanted to tell the women through this battle that the battlefield was not as dangerous as they imagined. At least on the battlefield with him, Yang Chendong, they could still be very relaxed. After tomorrow's battle, when Yang Chendong went out to lead troops to battle in the future, the women would not have to be so worried and afraid at home. The four girls left in high spirits. From the looks of it, it was clear that they were going to wear the new military uniforms and walk around the Yangjia village for everyone to see. They were going to receive some envious gazes. Yang Chendong stayed in the study, discussing something with Tiger's man and Yang San about tomorrow's battle. "Yang San, is your security bureau ready for tomorrow's battle?" Looking at the actual leader of the security bureau, Yang Chendong's tone had a trace of concern and comfort. "Young master, please rest assured that everything is ready. I promise not to let irrelevant people near the gate." Yang San replied respectfully and confidently. "Very good, this battle must be fought with a sense of mystery. You all remember, as an opponent, the less they know about your methods, the more they will be afraid of you. What we need to do is to form and maintain this sense of mystery to the greatest extent, so that the opponent can't figure out what to do." After saying this to Yang San, he said to Tiger's man, "Tell butler Yang Ning to pay attention to the security situation of the Yang family village. Presumably, some people who can't find out about the mercenaries will have their eyes on the Yang family village. These few days, young master, I have to deal with the Walla army, so I don't have time to deal with the matters of the village. I will leave Dao Zhao's second guard team to protect the village." "Yes, young master, I will inform Captain Dao Xiao in a while." However, I think that he will not be happy if he is not allowed to participate in the battle and is instead staying in the village. Tiger's man chuckled. Dao Xiao would definitely feel very wronged if he was not allowed to participate in the battle. Thinking back to the battle of the Tumu Castle, they did not go and instead stayed. Now that they were being asked to stay, it would be strange if they were happy. Yang Chendong smiled at this. Tell Dao Xiao that the division of tasks is different, but they are all equally important. Tell him not to be arrogant and impatient. In the future, the young master will have a lot of things to do, so there is no need to worry that they will not have a chance to participate in the battle. Yang Chendong was preparing for tomorrow's battle, and he was full of confidence. This was his first real battle in this world, so of course he had to make an exciting appearance. In comparison, there was another army that was also full of confidence heading towards the capital. They were Walla's 10,000 vanguard cavalry. The Battle of Tumu Fortress was a great victory, and it was unknown how many Ming Dynasty officials were killed. If it were not for Yang Chendong's intervention, perhaps even Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen would have been killed or captured. This battle also made Walla's appetite grow. Especially after Xi Ning defected to the enemy, she revealed many things about the Ming Dynasty, including many secrets of the imperial court and the imperial palace. According to what Xi Ning said, the Ming Dynasty's civil and military officials were not on the same side. They were very hostile and would often crush each other. For example, the Battle of the Tumu Castle was a conspiracy by the civil officials against the military officials in order to severely injure them. In this battle, didn't a general like Zhang Fu die on the battlefield? However, in reality, it was true that the civil and military officials were at odds with each other. However, in the Battle of the Tumu Castle, many generals died, so how much better were the civil officials? Again, if not for Yang Chendong's intervention, at least 2 ministers would have died on the battlefield. It didn't seem worth it to use such a heavy capital to design a plan. However, Walla didn't know this. They won the battle and thought that Xi Ning was right. Even when they were fighting against Shihang, it was Xi Ning who came up with the idea. First, they pretended to be weak and then baited the enemy step by step. In the end, they defeated the enemy. Because of this, Xi Ning became a good friend of Walla's people. Sai Bian Wang, who was in charge of leading the vanguard, was leading the army to the capital of the great Ming Dynasty. At the same time, he was asking Xi Ning if there were any powerful generals in the great Ming Dynasty that could fight against him. Xi Ning had thought about this question many times in his mind. He had thought of almost all of the courtiers and confirmed that there were still generals who could lead troops, but he could not think of anyone who could truly command an army. General, in the Battle of the Tumu Castle, the Ming Dynasty's military officials were all killed. There is no one left who can fight against our Walla's army. In addition, Yingzong went to Nanjing to rebuild the imperial court. The Ming Dynasty, which was divided into 2, has nothing to fear. Oh. Doesn't that mean that the Ming Dynasty's capital is at our fingertips? The wealth and women there will all belong to our Walla? Xi Ning laughed wildly. He was imagining beautiful women in his arms, delicious food in his mouth, and piles of gold and silver. Xi Ning looked down on the Xi Ning who only thought about wealth and women. A person who was too greedy couldn't achieve anything great. General, now that the Ming Dynasty's army is empty and weak, what we should do now is to lead the army into the capital and then go all the way south until we occupy the entire Ming Dynasty. Chapter 196. Yes, brother Xi Ning is right. But this matter still requires Big Brother Yeshen's decision. I think it's better to enter the capital first. The competition king chuckled. On the surface, he seemed to believe Xi Ning's suggestion, but in reality, he was short-sighted and had limited knowledge. It would be difficult for him to achieve anything great. Seeing this clearly, Xi Ning simply didn't say anything more. Once the capital was truly conquered, leader Yeshen would probably arrive soon. At that time, it wouldn't be too late to make a suggestion. At this time, both Sagan Wang and Xining treated the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty as their own backyard. In their view, wherever the army arrived, the enemy would definitely surrender. But they did not know that Yang Chendong had been waiting for them for a long time. Another day, the sun slowly rose from the east. With the arrival of a new day, the capital was extremely quiet. Because of the fear of war, those who could leave had basically left. Those who stayed behind were those who didn't want to leave for various reasons. In Yang Chendong's words, those who stayed behind had a stable mentality. Even if the war started, they wouldn't easily cause trouble. With no one causing trouble in the capital, Yang Chendong had less to worry about, and he could focus on fighting the Tile army. Although he had the Yangtze's new army and the world's most advanced firearms, he still had too few people. Including the 100 cold vanguards led by Xiao Feng, they only had 400 people. Facing an enemy dozens of times their number, they couldn't be careless. War had always been a very serious matter, and it was also the easiest thing to change. A careless mistake, or a problem in a link could directly change the outcome. Of course, Yang Chendong was still very confident in the Yangtze's new army's cold vanguards. They were forbidden from doing anything, so there wouldn't be any problems. What he was worried about was the 10,000 city defense army that the emperor had given him, including the 5,500 soldiers from the warden's office. These people were used to running amok in the city. Bullying ordinary people was not a problem, but when faced with the elite Walla cavalry, it was hard to say what the result would be. Even when they were fighting in a favorable battle, it was doubtful whether they could achieve complete victory. Thus, early in the morning, Yang Chendong had called over the 5 commanders and led them to the north gate of the capital, the Disheng Gate, to stand on the gate tower. Along with the 5 commanders, there was a general called Yang Guang. He was originally the deputy commander. When Shi Heng, the commander, lost the battle and disappeared, he naturally became extremely important. Yang Guang was quite capable. More importantly, he had a good attitude. When he saw Yang Chendong, he would call him Marquis, then Marquis. He felt very close. Under his lead, Sun Tong and the other commanders also changed from calling him Yang Ho to Marquis. Standing in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the other 5 commanders, Yang Chendong pointed behind him, which was the empty space outside Disheng Gate. Before long, the Walla cavalry will appear here. A big battle is unavoidable. Everyone, are you afraid? Yang Chendong's tone was very calm, even cold. It was as if the appearance of the enemy was like a story, unable to stir up any waves in his heart. In comparison, the 6 commanders' expressions were not as good. Yang Guang and Sun Tong were still in a better state. At least they could still stand up straight. Tao Jin, Yang Jia, Gao Li, and Mao Fushou, the 4 commanders' faces were obviously much uglier. If one looked carefully, their legs were trembling. In this month, the morning in the capital was not hot, but it was far from cold. However, the 4 of them were so nervous that they broke out in cold sweat. This was enough to show the fear in their hearts. Forget it, the 4 of you will follow what we said before. Each of you will lead 200 soldiers to maintain order in the city. But remember, before the enemy enters the city, there cannot be chaos in the capital. Otherwise, if there is a problem, the person who will be punished will be punished. Yang Chendong did not want Tao Jin and the other 3 to stay. Their presence was not only a good thing for the morale of the soldiers, it could also lead the other soldiers astray and make them feel afraid. Hearing that they did not have to face the Walla cavalry, Tao Jin and the other 3 heaved a sigh of relief. They clasped their fists and bowed to Yang Chendong before retreating from the tower. Only Yang Guang and Sun Tong were left. Yang Chendong said, "Vice Commander Yang, you are in charge of leading 5,000 cavalry to remain under the Disheng Gate. When the time comes, when I give the order, lead the army out of the city in pursuit. Remember, without Marquis' order, you are not to attack. Also, when you leave the city, do not go too far. 10 li is the limit. If you exceed this distance, immediately retreat. Do you understand? Yang Guang, who was called out, was confused. From Yang Chendong's words, he was leading the cavalry out to chase after the enemy. Did he not need to fight a battle? If he did not fight, how could he be sure that the enemy would escape? If they did not escape, how could they chase after them? But while he was confused, military orders were like mountains. Yang Chendong was the commanding general personally appointed by Zhu Qiyu. Since there was a military order, he only needed to follow it. Yes, please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely act according to your orders. After saying this, Yang Guang clasped his fists and left to make preparations. 5,000 strong horses. This was a number that had been gathered after searching the city for a long time. It was also one of the strongest forces in the capital that everyone could see. Yang Guang also left, leaving behind Sun Tong, the commanding general, standing there with his chest puffed out and his head raised. He also had an imposing aura. In history, Sun Tong had chosen to rely on Ji Ning. He had a glorious time, but in the end, his ending was very tragic. After understanding this part of history from the book, Yang Chendong realized that this person still had some ability. As long as he was guided well, he would become a good general. Thus, he intended to train him and keep him by his side. Commander Sun, I'll leave the remaining 4,000 people in the warden's office to you. They are all placed above the Desheng gate. You have to give people the impression that there are soldiers everywhere. Can you do it? Facing Sun Tong, Yang Chendong gave him his task. Please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely do a good job, Sun Tong replied in a loud voice, but in reality, he was already very confused. What did the loyal Marquis mean? Was he only leading soldiers to guard the city gates? Did he not need to send people to meet the enemy outside the city? It seemed that he was going to passively defend the city, but he didn't know if he would be able to do so. Sun Tong went to make arrangements, his mind filled with confusion. Just as he was wondering if he would have to rely on the city gate towers to stop Walla's army, a new order came down that left him completely confused. He didn't understand what Yang Chendong wanted to do. The new mission was to close all the gates of the capital except for the Desheng gate. The only one that wasn't closed, the Desheng gate, had to be left wide open so that people could walk straight in. He didn't understand why the gates had to be opened. Wouldn't this be allowing Walla's army to enter? It had to be known that cavalry was most proficient in land attacks. If they defended the city gates, they might have a chance of winning. But if they opened the gates and let the people in, wouldn't that mean that they were giving up their advantage? This would only increase the difficulty of defending the city. Sun Tong, who couldn't understand, arranged for people to follow Yang Chendong's orders while ordering his trusted aide to inform eunuch Ji Ning in the palace. The wheels of history were so similar. In his previous life, he had relied on Ji Ning, and in this life, he was going to follow the same trend. In the palace, all the officials were summoned to the court. Compared to the usual court meetings, all the officials had lost the mood to submit memorials today. Zhu Qiyu sat on the dragon throne, but no matter how big the dragon throne was, it didn't seem to be able to calm him down. As if he was on pins and needles, he would move his butt from time to time, vividly displaying his anxiety. In reality, he couldn't help but worry. If the capital fell, it would be the end of his reign as emperor. He would become the second emperor after Zhu Qiyu to be defeated by Walla, becoming a disgrace in the history of the great Ming dynasty. Whether he would become a lofty emperor, a prisoner, or even a dead man all depended on how this battle to defend the capital was fought. Unlike in history, Yu Qian, the assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel, was no longer present. Under Yang Chendong's guidance, they did not engage in battle with Walla's army on the outskirts. After Shi Heng's defeat, all the pressure was focused on the Victory Gate. That place would decide the final outcome of this battle. Reporting. Just as Zhu Qiyu's face was still filled with apprehension, the soldier sent by Sun Pao arrived outside the throne room. Enter the hall. Ji Ning, who was standing next to Zhu Qiyu, was also concerned about the outcome of this battle. This time, he didn't wait for the emperor to agree before shouting out orders. At this moment of life and death, no one was thinking about whether Ji Ning had overstepped her authority. Everyone was thinking about whether there would be a result in front of them. Was it a victory? Or had they lost? The soldier was allowed to enter, so he lowered his head and walked into the hall. Soon after, he dropped to his knees and loudly reported, "Marquis of Loyalty has ordered the Victory Gate to be opened. Deputy Commander Yang Guang has led 5,000 cavalry to lie in wait within the city. Commander Sun Tong has led 4,000 some soldiers to guard the gate tower of the Victory Gate." What? As the soldier finished explaining the situation at the gate, the imperial court instantly grew rowdy. How could they possibly open the gate? The Walla cavalry are most skilled in charging formations. The tall walls are our only support. Abandoning the gate tower to defend is simply avoiding our advantage. Minister of War Yi Ming loudly proclaimed in order to show off his erudition. That's right, that's right. Marquis of Loyalty's actions are truly inappropriate, the other officials began to jeer. Enough. The Minister of Rights, Hu Chang, was so angry that his lips trembled as he roared when he saw that the imperial court had turned into a pot of porridge. They were actually acting like commoners on the street. Chapter 197. With this roar, all the officials focused their gazes on him. You are all important officials of the court, yet you are throwing yourselves into chaos like commoners. Where is your decency? Hu Shao raised his beard and loudly questioned the officials. In terms of age and experience, Hu Kuang had sufficient qualifications. With this shout, many of the officials lowered their heads, not daring to argue with him. But there were also those who did not fear Hu Shao, such as the Minister of War, Yi Ming, who stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet. Minister Hu, could it be that just because Yang Chendong is your grandson-in-law, you are protecting him like this? The Minister of Works, Shi Pu, also stepped forward and said, Minister Hu, now is not the time to be thinking about family ties. That's right. When the country is in danger, we should consider the big picture and put family ties aside. The new Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, also stepped forward and criticized Hu Shao. After attending court for so many years, Hu Shao had rarely been attacked by 3 ministers at once. But in the face of this situation, he had no intention of backing down. Instead, he looked at the 3 of them and said with disdain, "Oh? So the 3 of you should know how to fight, right? If that's the case, why didn't you step forward to shoulder the heavy burden when His Majesty was selecting great generals?" This. The Minister of War, Yi Ming, blushed at Hu Shao's words. He knew that he was the one who should step forward to shoulder the burden, but he did not have the confidence to do so. Now that Hu Shao had said this, he was clearly attacking him. Minister Hu, we are talking about the matter of the Victory Gate opening without attacking. Please don't change the topic, okay? Could it be that Yang Chendong has already surrendered to the Walla, and as his grandfather, you will also benefit from it? Is that why you are speaking up for him? Yi Ming's attack touched on what everyone was most worried about. For a moment, the expressions of many officials changed. Even Zhu Qiyu, who sat on the dragon throne, turned ghastly pale. If what Minister Yi Ming said was true, then wasn't he handing the capital over to the enemy? Minister Yi, please conduct yourself with dignity. Seeing that the emperor and all the ministers were moved by Yi Ming's words, Hu Shao roared with a face full of anger, "Does Minister Yi have any evidence for what he said?" Evidence? Of course not, but why is the city gate open? Yi Ming couldn't help but gloat when he saw Hu Shao getting angry. Originally, he wasn't even a third-rank official, but because of Zhu Qiyu's appreciation, he was given the position of Minister of War and became a second-rank official of the Great Ming Dynasty. But even so, he knew that some of the more experienced old officials still didn't like him. Now, he could say that minister who was speechless. In the future, no one would dare to look down on him in court. Hu Shao was an old official of several dynasties and had seen many storms. How could he be stumped by a new noble, Yi Ming? Hearing that the other party had no evidence, he couldn't help but sneer and ask, since there is no evidence, Yi Daren's words just now are suspected of framing. The contempt in Hu Zhao's eyes was very obvious when he didn't even call him minister and changed to lord. Yi Ming's face immediately turned ugly when he heard Hu Zhao's words. But before he could think of a counterattack, Hu Shao continued, during this period of time, who doesn't know that the loyal marquis has bought a lot of property in the capital? Let me ask you, if he didn't have absolute confidence in defending the capital, why would he do this? This might be because he wants to calm the people. Besides, if he has already colluded with Walla, I believe that when the foreign race enters the capital, they won't touch his property, right? Yi Ming didn't know how to answer the question, so he simply gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a petty person. Huh, what a joke. This is simply your excessive conjecture. Presumably, the emperor and the officials already knew what kind of person Walla was. He was simply a group of insatiable people. Just think about it. How could they put away their greed for the sake of others when dealing with such a person? If the loyal marquis wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. Everyone, don't forget who saved Ingzong from Walla. If he wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. When Ingzong's name was mentioned, the ministers immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Yes, if Yang Chendong was really such a traitor, he didn't need to do that at all. This reason instantly convinced many people, including acting sect master Zhu Qiyu. The loyal marquis saved Ingzong's life, but he didn't go to Nanjing a while ago? I believe everyone can already understand his intentions. This time, he's withstanding a huge amount of pressure to fight against a strong enemy. If we still don't trust him, wouldn't it be too disappointing? Hu Chang spoke as if he was fighting for justice for Yang Chendong. In fact, he was also very optimistic about his grandson-in-law. With Hu Zhao's words, the originally excited ministers quickly calmed down. Even Emperor Zhu Qiyu was a lot more confident because of these words. He said in the court, yes, the loyal marquis is loyal to the Great Ming. No one is allowed to say such words in the future. Now let us wait for the good news. Because of Hu Zhao's argument, the debate in the court was finally suppressed. Yang Chendong, who was still unaware of this, was standing on the tower of the Victory Gate at this moment, looking into the distance. He didn't know that Hu Shao had helped him block the attacks of the ministers, so he could lead the army in the front line at ease. Of course, even without Hu Zhao's help, Yang Chendong wouldn't hand over his military power at this time. It would just cause a lot of trouble. Standing on the tower, the moment he put down the binoculars, he said with a smile to the four delicate women in camouflage clothing standing beside him, "You can see now, the Walla cavalry is here." Ah! Are they here? Where are they, where are they? Hu Shao and the other women were very excited at this moment. They each held the binoculars hanging around their necks and looked into the distance. Sure enough, there was a burst of smoke and dust, and the Walla cavalry was here. With the competition king as the leader and Shi Ning as the guide, the 10,000 Walla cavalry were rapidly heading toward the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. With so many people, looking from a distance, it was really a spectacular sight. Seeing that they were less than 15 li away from the capital, the fast horse scouts in the front line rushed back and reported that the Victory Gate in the capital was wide open. The gate is wide open? What does this mean? The competition king was somewhat at a loss when he heard this news. Logically speaking, if the Great Ming army knew that he was coming, they would either defend the city to the death or flee like crazy. why did they open the gate? This was inconsistent with the facts. Xi Ning was also confused by this news. He had not been in the capital for so long, so he did not know what had happened here. All he knew was that the great Ming dynasty had a situation where two emperors ruled together because of Zhu Qiyu's ascension. That was all. In Xi Ning's opinion, having two emperors ruling together was a good thing. When the power was divided, it gave the Walla army a chance to break through. But now that the gate of the capital was wide open, he could not figure it out. Before he could figure out what was going on, the competition king had already asked him. Brother Xi Ning, why did the great Ming dynasty open the victory gate? Could it be that they want to surrender to us? This, maybe. Xi Ning did not know the reason, so he naturally did not dare to talk nonsense. He could only follow the competition king's words. Xi Ning was just being polite. To put it bluntly, he did not have any ideas. But when the competition king heard his answer, he thought that he had guessed correctly. He was overjoyed and said, "Ha, as expected. The great Ming dynasty's army is just a scoundrel. When they know that our elite cavalry is coming, they must be panicking. In order to save their lives, it is possible that they will take the initiative to surrender. In this case, order the army to speed up and try to enter the capital for lunch at noon." Hearing the order, the Walla cavalry was overjoyed and eager to go, but only Xi Ning felt that things were not so simple. However, he really could not think of a reason to do so, so he could only follow the army to the victory gate. "They are coming straight to us." On the city gate tower, Hu Yan jumped and said. Then she realized that her performance was a little rude, so she immediately walked to Yang Chendong's side with a red face. "Ha!" Seeing Hu Yan showing such a cute side, Yang Chendong laughed. He was more proud that the Walla army was coming to the victory gate according to his plan, which was what made him happy. There were only 10,000 city defense soldiers, and they were only a second-line army. Yang Chendong did not dare to have too much hope for them. But the capital of the great Ming dynasty was really too big. There were as many as 12 gates that could enter the city. How to concentrate the troops and lure the enemy to attack was the first thing to consider. In order to achieve this goal, Yang Chendong ordered the other 11 gates to be closed, and only the victory gate was opened. Now, it seemed that he had successfully attracted the enemy's troops. It was only a distance of 15 li. In just a few moments, Vala's mighty cavalry appeared outside the victory gate. It was truly an army of more than 10,000 soldiers. Coupled with the fact that they were cavalry, it gave people a sense of grandeur. This kind of battle formation also scared Hu Yan and the other girls. Everything they knew about war was just from hearing about it. They had never seen it like this. For a moment, their bodies trembled because of nervousness. Yang Chendong had already noticed their changes. He walked forward and gave them a big hug. The warm hug quickly calmed them down. Then, the sixth young master Yang strode to the front of the city wall. He looked down and saw Xi Ning and the others coming out of the cavalry. Chapter 198. It was originally Xi Ning's idea to take the initiative to come out. In his eyes, the great Ming dynasty was already finished. They would only have a bright future if they followed Walla. What he needed to do now was to perform well before everything was set in stone and gain more capital so that he could gain more benefits in the future. That was what he needed to do now. Therefore, when the army was 300 steps away from the gate, he took the initiative to ask to be the vanguard and talk to the great Ming Empire's garrison to see if they could enter the city without shedding any blood. For Xi Ning's request, the king of competition naturally agreed. When the two armies met, there was already danger. If someone wanted to take the initiative to volunteer, how could he not agree? Therefore, Xi Ning came to the victory gate with 2 Walla cavalry soldiers who were protecting him. Xi Ning, who was riding his horse, looked arrogant, but in fact, he was very careful. This could be seen from the fact that he stopped when he was 180 steps away from the gate. He still cherished his life. At that time, the most advanced long-range weapons were firearms and strong bows. However, the effective range of a strong bow was generally about 160 steps. It would lose its original power if it was further away. As for firearms, although they could shoot that far away, they would definitely lose their accuracy. It could be said that 180 steps was a safe distance. Which general is on the gate tower? Can you come out and meet me? I am the vanguard of the Walla army, Shi Ning. As soon as he arrived at the victory gate, Shi Ning's unpleasant voice, which sounded like a male duck's throat, rushed straight to the top of the gate tower. Yang Chengwang was still dressed in cyan. After Shi Ning shouted, Yang Chengwang walked to the gate tower unhurriedly and exposed his body completely. He looked down at Shi Ning and cupped his fists. It turns out to be eunuch Shi. I've been waiting here for a long time. The one who came out was actually Yang Chendong. Shi Ning narrowed his eyes and looked up. Suddenly, a burst of anger rose from the bottom of his heart. His younger brother, Shi Sheng, once had a conflict with Yang Chendong. Not long after that, his younger brother died while performing a mission. Although the report at that time said that his younger brother died because of excessive indulgence in sex with a prostitute called Sai Tian Xian, he was unwilling to believe this fact. Shi Sheng could be said to be a veteran in the field of flowers. How could he make such a low-level mistake? His instincts told him that there was something fishy about this matter, and it was very likely that he had been harmed by his enemies. However, because her younger brother and she had offended too many people, it was not easy to find a target. However, he still secretly investigated. Before the results were out, Ying Zong, Zhu Qizhen, had already sent him to the battlefield, which led to the current situation. Back then, Yang Chendong was one of the people he suspected. Now that he suddenly saw this person reveal himself, how could he remain calm? At that moment, he coldly snorted and said, I really can't believe it. Is there no one else in the great Ming dynasty? How could they let a brat greet the Walla's army? Shi Ning's words clearly implied something, and also expressed her strong dissatisfaction with Yang Chendong. He said that the sixth young master Yang was too young to take on such a big responsibility. As soon as these words came out, Tiger's Mane and the others, as well as Hu Yen and the other girls, were immediately dissatisfied. As the person involved, Yang Chendong was not angry at this time. On the contrary, he said with a smile, Duke Shi, you flatter me. As the saying goes, the kind of person you are dealing with depends on the kind of person you are dealing with. Just like the Walla who doesn't know what's good for him and doesn't know how to repay kindness, the great Ming dynasty can send the young marquis to deal with him. Hu Yen and the other women covered their mouths and chuckled at his counterattack. First, Shi Ning looked down on Yang Chendong, and then she was ridiculed. It was because the Walla was weak that the great Ming dynasty sent the young Marquis of Loyalty to greet him. The meaning was that the great Ming dynasty would send the kind of person you are. This is called equality. If you look down on Yang Chendong, then you are actually looking down on yourself. This was clearly Yang Chendong giving her a taste of her own medicine. Hu Yen and the other girls, who had long known that Lu Lang's words were powerful, how could they not feel sad for Shi Ning at this moment? There were not many people in the world who could win against their husband in a war of words. On the city tower, Yang Chendong's words of sarcasm and even abuse made Shi Ning's face turn red and her eyes widen. But before she could make any counterattack, Yang Chendong continued, your body, hair, and skin are from your parents. You don't dare to destroy the beginning of filial piety. If you castrate yourself, how will you have the face to see your parents and relatives when you go to the underworld? This is unfilial. Loyal to the country, you have received the kindness of the great Ming dynasty. You should be a person of the great Ming dynasty. Even if you die, you will be a ghost of the great Ming dynasty. However, in order to survive, you ran to the enemy. This is a cruel and unscrupulous act. This is disloyal. You bully the common people and are greedy. Your parents and family were once common people. Once you gained power, you bullied the weak. This is unbenevolent. For your own selfishness, you actually danced with the wolves and wanted to lead the war to the great Ming Dynasty, making the common people homeless and living in misery. This is unrighteous. You are disloyal, unfilial, heartless, and unrighteous people. I don't know how you have the face to live in this world. After a series of hearty and incessant curses, Xi Ning's face became more and more unsightly. She felt as if the blood in her body seemed to be churning endlessly, and in the next moment, she would spit it out. Xi Ning's performance was seen by Yang Chendong, but he did not have the slightest intention of stopping. Instead, he raised his voice by a few decibels and continued to shout, "You are a thief. Heaven and earth are witnesses. You are the leader of the thieves." After shouting, Yang Chendong suddenly pointed at Xi Ning with his right hand and said, "If the heavens have eyes, this child should die immediately. He can no longer cause trouble in the world." Pooh! A bullet flew out, following Yang Chendong's finger, and landed right where Xi Ning's heart was. Xi Ning, who was originally angry, only felt a pain in his chest, and then he lost all feeling. With a plop, he fell from the horse to the ground. Everything happened too fast. When the sniper rifle with a silencer was fired, coupled with Yang Chendong's shout, it did not attract the slightest bit of attention from others. What everyone saw was the scene of Xi Ning falling from the horse and hitting the ground after Yang Chendong asked the heavens. Xi Ning was dead. His body was lying on the ground. It gave people the feeling that even if he died, he could not wash away the sins he had committed. Therefore, he could not face others. Jia! The two Walla cavalry soldiers who were originally standing beside Xi Ning saw that the person they were protecting was actually cursed to death. They were shocked and immediately turned their horses back. "You are aiding the evildoer. How can the heavens forgive you so easily? Let's die together." Seeing that the fat sheep in his hands was about to escape, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a sneer. Then, he pointed at the two Walla cavalry soldiers who were rushing back. Immediately, the two figures fell from the horse and rolled on the ground twice. After that, there was no sign of life. With 3 finger strikes, 3 people died in succession. This shocking scene shocked everyone. At this time, whether it was the great Ming soldiers on the city tower or the Walla cavalry soldiers below the city, they all looked up at the sky. They seemed to be looking for the place where the gods were. The gods have shown themselves. After the Walla cavalry 3 steps away from the city wall couldn't find the reason, there was a commotion. Many of the cavalry had already reached out and tightened the ropes of their horses. It seemed that they would retreat at any time. "Don't panic, don't panic." The leader of the cavalry was also surprised, but as the vanguard general, he couldn't retreat like this. Otherwise, not only would he be punished by the military law, he was afraid that he would be ridiculed by the other generals when he returned. Under the loud roar, the Walla cavalry gradually calmed down. In order to stabilize the morale of the troops, the leader stretched out his waist and pulled out the scimitar. It seemed that he was ready to attack. "What? Don't you know how to retreat? If that's the case, then stay here." Yang Chendong, who was standing on the city tower, narrowed his eyes. He couldn't let the Walla cavalry charge. Otherwise, it was inevitable that there would be casualties in the chaos. He had to fight this battle beautifully. He couldn't afford any losses. Therefore, when he saw that the leader was about to pull out his scimitar, Yang Chendong pointed his right hand in the air. The leader, who had just raised his scimitar, twisted his body on the horse and fell to his death. Not good, the general fell off his horse. The leader was already shot in the forehead and couldn't be saved. A few of his soldiers wanted to get down from their horses to see what happened. On the city tower, Yang Chendong pointed his finger again. The 5 Walla cavalrymen who had just dismounted fell to the ground one by one and died. Ah! It's really a god. Run! Under the continuous deaths, the Walla cavalry was agitated by the scene in front of them. They were surrounded by a deep sense of fear. It was as if they were afraid that they would be the next one to be pointed at. The cavalrymen in the front row all turned their horses around. The Walla cavalry suddenly became chaotic. With the death of the leader, there was no commanding general and no unified military order. The consequences of this chaos were very serious. Yang Chendong, who was on the victory pavilion, had already predicted this moment. Seeing that the opportunity was here, he decisively said to Sun Tong, "Quick, order General Yang Guang to go out of the city and kill the enemy." Sun Tong was also stunned by Yang Chendong's continuous pointing. At this moment, he also had a feeling that it was a god. He was so shocked that he would do whatever Yang Chendong said. He immediately agreed and went to pass on the order. Yang Guang, who was under the victory pavilion, saw the situation outside clearly through the hole in the city wall. He was so shocked that he forgot to chase after the enemy. It wasn't until Sun Tong ran to his side and loudly said that the loyal marquis had ordered to go out of the city and kill the enemy that he recovered. "All cavalrymen, listen to my order. Go out of the city and kill the enemy. Go out of the city and kill the enemy." Many of the soldiers saw Yang Chendong's godlike appearance and their morale was greatly shaken. One by one, they waved their scimitars and rushed out of the city gate. Chapter 199. The formation of the Walla cavalry was still in disarray. When they saw countless great Ming cavalry rushing out of the city gates, they became even more flustered. Every single one of them turned on their horses and fled. However, their formation was already in a complete mess. How could they just run away like that? Before the great Ming cavalry could even reach them, they had already trampled over many of their own people. By the time the great Ming cavalry arrived, they were like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. They only cared about covering their heads and fleeing like rats. No one dared to fight against the great Ming cavalry. This was a one-sided battle. With the death of their general and the loss of their morale, the Walla cavalry was completely routed. In this kind of situation, how could they possibly be a match for the great Ming cavalry whose morale was at its peak? For a time, the situation on the battlefield was completely one-sided. Standing on top of the city gates of the Victory Gate, one could see the Walla cavalry being slaughtered. There were even some Walla cavalry soldiers kneeling on the ground and begging to surrender. The facts proved that there was no army that was undefeatable. As long as one used the right method, they could be defeated and surrendered. Yang Guang waved his large blade and led the charge. Just the number of Walla cavalry soldiers killed by him exceeded 7. Under his leadership, the majority of the great Ming cavalry also managed to kill a few. In the end, they were already 15 li away from the city gates. At this moment, Yang Guang suddenly remembered the words of the loyal marquis. He immediately stopped his horse and gave up on the pursuit. Instead, he turned around and began to clean up the battlefield. He. With the situation settled, Yang Chendong revealed a hearty smile. He was in a good mood as he waved at Hu Yan and the others. "Come, let's go back to the immortal abode to eat. Let's go, let's go." Hu Yan and the others didn't show the slightest bit of fear. After seeing the brave side of their husband, the fear in their hearts had long flown beyond the highest heavens. "Marquis Yang, the war isn't over yet." Sun Tong saw that Yang Chendong was about to leave and hurriedly stood in front of him with a pleading expression. "Isn't today's war already over?" "Oh, that's right. You can also bring your subordinates to capture captives now. That's a great contribution. After we clean up the battlefield, we can report to the emperor. As for Marquis, he is a little tired and should go back and rest. When the main force of the Walla arrives, Marquis will appear." After saying this to Sun Tong, Yang Chendong and the 4 madams went back to the Victory Gate. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Qiu V's first guard team protected him as they gradually disappeared from Sun Tong's sight. Seeing Yang Chendong leave in such a carefree manner, Sun Tong felt a little regretful. He regretted that he did not seize the opportunity to associate with the loyal Marquis, and regretted that he sent the information that the city gates were wide open to the Emperor. Since the deed had already been done, he could only think of a way to make up for it in the future. As for now, of course, he had to lead the troops to capture the captives. Just as Yang Chendong had said, this was a great contribution. Normally, they wouldn't even encounter it, so how could they let it go now that they had encountered it? Sun Tong rushed down the tower with more than 4,000 people and rushed to the front of the Walla cavalry who were kneeling on the ground. The officers and soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office, who originally only bullied the civilians, were now standing upright, as if they had changed into another person. After an hour, the battlefield was cleaned up, and the battle report was also summarized. In one battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed and more than 5,000 were captured. Yang Chendong's debut finally ended with a great victory. Because Sun Tong was focused on snatching military merits, the throne room did not receive the news immediately. Zhu Qiyu and the ministers were together, waiting for the battle report with a nervous expression. From time to time, the ministers would prick up their ears to listen to the movements outside. However, everything was as usual, and they did not hear any sounds of fighting coming from the city. Since there was no movement, it was good news. The emperor and the officials waited patiently until a eunuch came to report that Deputy Chief Commander Yang Guang and Commander Sun Tong were waiting outside the hall. Zhu Qiyu hurriedly said, "Quickly invite them in." He even used the word invite. It could be seen that at this moment, Zhu Qiyu was very concerned about the development of the battle, so much so that he did not even care about losing decorum. Yang Guang and Sun Tong, who were wearing heavy armor, strode into the throne room. When they were 20 steps away from the emperor, they took the initiative to stop. Then, they half knelt on the ground and said in unison, "Great victory, we have come to offer the captives." Although it was only 2 people's voices, under full confidence, their voices were extremely loud and clear. This voice was like a giant hammer that struck the hearts of the emperor and the ministers. Hua! The emperor and the ministers, who were originally motionless and staring at the 2 people, couldn't help but tense up and then relax. After hearing the 2 people's reports, they were silent for a few seconds, as if they were all digesting this great victory report. How many captives were captured? What was the result of the battle? The Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, was worthy of being an old minister. His reaction was extremely fast. While the others were still in shock, he had already asked the key question. In this battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed, more than 5,000 captives were captured, including Walla's vanguard general, Sai Bian Wang, vanguard Guan Xining, and others. 10,000 enemies came, but only 2,000 managed to escape. Yang Guang's voice was still loud. More than 5,000 enemy captives are now outside the imperial palace. Emperor and the ministers, please go and take a look. Sun Tong was not willing to give up and reported the merit. This was also what the 2 of them had discussed on the way here. Since the battle was fought together, of course, the merit could not be claimed by one person. In any case, the merit was big enough, so it was not a big deal to have one more person share the burden. In this battle, our army did not have any casualties. We killed the enemy like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. This is all because the emperor is protected by the heavens. This official congratulates the emperor. This official congratulates the emperor. When Sun Tong's words of congratulation came out, the ministers reacted at this time. They collectively kneeled on the ground and shouted loudly and excitedly. In the past, such words were said by the civil officials. The military officials only needed to focus on the battle. Usually, wasn't the reason why they were raised to be used at critical times? As for the merit or not, forget it. Even if they were military officials, it was their responsibility to win the battle. Did you not see Duking Zhangfu's example? When there was a battle, there was limitless glory. When there was no battle, there was all kinds of suspicion and jealousy from the emperor. Even a random eunuch might dare to bully you. In the end, you ended up without a corpse. Sun Tong rushed to say this sentence, not because of a whim, but because he had thought about it along the way. Why was it that when he risked his life and had the merit, only those civil officials who were good at talking would get it? He was not convinced, so he took the initiative. Sure enough, taking the initiative to say congratulations to the emperor, Sun Tong attracted a lot of good feelings from Zhu Qiyu. Good, good, very good. General Yang and General Sun have worked hard. After defeating the Walla army, you will be rewarded according to your merits. Ha ha ha, now, everyone, follow me to see the prisoners. Zhu Qiyu, who was originally nervous and clenched his hands until they turned white, could finally put down his high-hanging heart at this moment. At this moment, he was also in a good mood. Laughing loudly, he led the ministers straight to the square outside the imperial palace. On the square, there was a black mass of Walla cavalry in strange clothes kneeling on the ground. They all had their heads lowered, their faces dispirited. Some of them were even trembling slightly to show that their hearts were not calm at this moment, and were even a little scared. It was no wonder that they were so nervous. Previously, when Yang Chendong stretched out his finger at the victory gate, one by one, the Walla cavalry fell to the ground and died. Even their general, the king, died because of this. That scene shocked them so much that they still felt scared when they thought about it. The Walla, who had no culture, were very superstitious. They agreed very much with the saying that the gods had appeared. Since even the gods wanted to help the great Ming Empire, how could they fight this war? Surrendering and atoning for their sins might be able to exchange for the forgiveness of the gods. More than 5,000 Walla cavalrymen knelt on the ground obediently. Although their hands were tied, with their current mentality, even if they weren't tied up, not many of them would have the guts to resist. When Zhu Qiyu came here with the ministers, he saw this scene in front of him. Looking at the kneeling Walla cavalry, he couldn't see the end of it. The square, which originally looked very wide, was now very crowded. The great Ming Empire's soldiers and the Walla surrendered soldiers were all over the ground. At this moment, no one doubted Yang Guang and Sun Tong's battle report. They thought that the war should be won, but the result would not be so good. The two generals were exaggerating in order to get military merits. But now it seemed that they were not exaggerating at all. Involuntarily, when the ministers looked at Yang Guang and Sun Tong, their eyes were full of jealousy. People were like this. When in danger, they often thought that it was enough to save their lives, and other worldly possessions could be ignored. But when it was really safe, the thoughts in their hearts would become more and more greedy. This was just a victory, and the Walla's main force had not suffered much damage, but some ministers were thinking about how to get benefits from it. It could be seen that a man who was not content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. It was not as simple as saying, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. This is caused by Your Majesty's heavenly power. This is enough to prove that Your Majesty is the true Son of Heaven." Eunuch Jining looked at the seemingly countless captive soldiers in front of him. After his eyes rolled around, he suddenly knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is the true Son of Heaven." Many ministers who were used to flattering also took the opportunity to kneel on the ground and shouted loudly for the emperor's wisdom. The shouts of the ministers made Zhu Qiyu feel like he was floating. At this moment, he really thought that he was the emperor recognized by the heavens, and he was the son of the heavens. Otherwise, why was his imperial brother Zhu Qizhan defeated by Walla, and why was Shiheng also defeated by Walla, but only he won? You're tuning in to the Unparalleled Sword Will YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.